Beneath the dense canopy of Central America, stone temples rise like forgotten mountains, their steps swallowed by roots and time. The Maya Empire once flourished here, a civilization of astronomers, architects, and storytellers who measured the heavens with uncanny precision, who carved their histories into towering stelae, and who built cities that rivaled the great powers of the ancient world. For centuries, their world expanded across vast jungles and plains, connecting kingdoms with sacred causeways, binding rulers to gods through ritual, blood, and prophecy. Their calendars tracked not years, but cosmic cycles stretching back to the dawn of creation itself. And yet, just as swiftly as their empire reached its zenith, silence fell. Cities that had echoed with chants and festivals stood abandoned, overtaken by vines. Why did such brilliance fade? Was it drought, war, famine, or a deeper mystery written in the stars they so carefully observed? Tonight, we journey through the rise, glory, and mysterious collapse of the Mayan Empire, uncovering the fragments of a world both deeply human and hauntingly otherworldly, where memory lingers in stone and questions remain carved in shadow. Chapter 1. Nakbé, the forgotten first city deep in the Pitem Basin of northern Guatemala, where the canopy rises like a green ocean and the calls of unseen birds ripple through the heavy air, lies a city that predates the better-known wonders of the Mayan world. Long before Tikal rose to dominance, before Chichen Itzá's pyramid cast its equinox shadow, Nakbé emerged in the silent jungle as one of the very first great experiments. In Maya urban life, archaeologists tell us that Nakbé was already thriving by 1000 BCE, centuries before the classic period would see the Maya reach their greatest heights. Here, amid the tangle of roots and vines, the earth itself was shaped into monumental platforms. Vast mounds of limestone rubble were raised, then smoothed with white plaster, forming terraces that once gleamed in the sun. The earliest signs of Maya architecture are found here, not tentative or modest, but already bold. Causeways stretched outward, linking ceremonial centers with distant neighborhoods. And from these elevated walkways, decorated with stucco masks of gods and ancestors, one could look out across a city that seemed to appear almost fully formed. It is this suddenness that lingers like a whisper in the mind. The development of complex societies is usually imagined as gradual, villages to towns, towns to cities. Yet at Nakbé, the evidence shows a leap, a civilization seemingly springing from the jungle with an architectural language already refined. Who were these people, and from where did they draw their knowledge? Walking through Nakbé today, the jungle hides as much as it reveals. Saber trees clutch the sides of forgotten temples, their roots cascading like frozen waterfalls of wood. The air is thick with the scent of earth and vegetation, and the silence is broken only by the drone of insects. Beneath this stillness, fragments of plaster masks lie half buried in the soil, their features worn smooth by centuries of rain. Once, these masks towered over ceremonial plazas, their immense faces staring outward with expressions of power and divinity. They represent deities tied to maize, to fertility, to the cycles of life and death. To stand before them would have been to confront the sacred order of the cosmos itself. The city's causeways, or sac biob as they are called in Maya language, are among the most intriguing remnants. These raised limestone roads stretched across the dense forest, binding distant parts of the settlement together. To build such structures required not only architectural knowledge, but also centralized organization. Resources had to be gathered, labor coordinated, and vision maintained. Nakbé shows us the earliest evidence of such centralized power in the Maya lowlands. And yet, the nature of that power remains elusive. We find no clear inscriptions here, no long dynastic histories carved into stone as at later sites. Instead, the city speaks in silence, through its sheer scale, through the stubborn endurance of stone platforms beneath the jungle. What is perhaps most haunting is that Nakbé did not last. By around 150 CE, the city was already in decline, its monumental plazas abandoned, its causeways left to crumble. The rise was sudden, and so was the fall. Archaeologists debate the reasons. Some point to environmental exhaustion, as the people cleared too much forest to sustain their building and agriculture. Others suggest conflict, perhaps rivalries with neighboring El Mirador, or internal struggles we can no longer trace. And there are those who look deeper still, wondering whether Nakbé was not the beginning, but merely the continuation of something older, a tradition carried from an even more forgotten world. The stucco masks found here carry echoes of this older stratum. Their features are not crude attempts, but sophisticated, deeply symbolic forms. One mask, stretching several meters across, shows a deity with gaping mouth and curling ornaments, perhaps linked to the sun or the maize cycle. The artistry suggests a people already well versed in cosmology and symbolism. Such complexity does not usually emerge without precedent. Could Nakbé have inherited forms and myths from cultures now erased, their memory dissolved into the shadows of prehistory? When the first archaeologists began to map Nakbé in the 1930s, they were astonished by its scale. Subsequent surveys, particularly with modern LiDAR technology, revealed even more. Vast networks of structures hidden beneath the jungle, invisible from the ground. What we see today is only a fraction of what once was. Entire districts remain unexcavated, sealed beneath layers of soil and vegetation, perhaps holding clues that could alter our understanding of Maya origins. Yet, excavation is slow, and the forest protects its secrets well. Walking along the faint rise of a causeway, one can imagine the processions that once moved here. Priests carrying offerings, rulers in elaborate headdresses, perhaps even common people drawn into ceremonies that connected the earthly with the divine. The raised roads were not only practical, but symbolic. Paths that elevated participants above the ordinary ground, setting them apart in ritual space. Each journey across them may have been a reenactment of myth, a crossing from one realm to another. The monumental platforms that dominate Nakbé's core would have been crowned with temples and residences. From atop these structures, rulers could look across their domain, reinforcing their authority through sheer height and visibility. Yet today, climbing those same platforms, the view is only of endless forest, stretching to every horizon. The silence is absolute. It is in this silence that the mystery deepens. Why did Nakbé fade, leaving its stones to the mercy of jungle and rain? Was it merely the fate of early cities, to rise and collapse until more sustainable models emerged? Or was there something more? A hidden trauma, a catastrophe that erased memory? Some researchers suggest that the abandonment of early centers like Nakbé created the stage for later Maya cities to flourish. But if so, why do the earliest examples show such ambition, such grandeur, as though recalling something that had to be rebuilt quickly before it was lost? In the myths of the Maya, there is often reference to cycles of creation and destruction. Worlds made and unmade by gods before the present age. The Popol Vuh, though recorded much later, preserves these echoes, attempts by divine beings to shape humanity, failures, destructions, and new beginnings. One wonders whether Nakbé reflects not only an archaeological reality, but also this mythic rhythm, a civilization rising, shining briefly, and vanishing, leaving only the memory that something grand once stood here. The jungle reclaims what it can. Moss creeps across plaster, lianas pull down walls, and birds nest in the hollows of fallen stones. Yet despite millennia of erosion, the platforms still rise. The causeways still hold their shape. The stucco masks, though broken, still gaze with hollow eyes. The city refuses to vanish completely. It endures as a ghost, half revealed, half concealed, inviting us to listen rather than to conclude. To stand at Nakbé is to stand at the edge of beginnings. Not the beginning of humanity, nor even of Mesoamerica, but the beginning of something distinctly Maya, a vision of city life, of monumental scale, of cosmological order written into architecture. And yet, like a first attempt or an echo of memory, it did not last. The jungle closed in, the people moved on, and history began again elsewhere. As we move forward, we carry with us the image of Nakbé, a city both grand and silent, both foundational and forgotten. It reminds us that the story of the Maya is not a simple progression, but a rhythm of rise and fall, of revelation and concealment. And perhaps, hidden in its stones, are the first whispers of an older truth, one that will continue to follow us through the ruins yet to come. Chapter 2, El Mirador, the lost metropolis of giants in the northern reaches of Guatemala's Petén jungle, where the rainforest folds into itself like an endless green sea. There lies a silence so complete that it can feel almost unnatural. Beneath that silence, beneath the weight of centuries of fallen leaves, vines, and shifting soil, waits a city of such scale that its very existence unsettles the neat timelines of history. Its name is El Mirador, the lookout. To archaeologists, it is often called the cradle of Maya civilization. To those who walk among its ruins, it feels more like a paradox, a riddle carved in limestone and buried in the living earth. El Mirador first began to rise around the 6th century before our era, and by 150 BCE it was already one of the largest cities anywhere in the Americas. What makes this extraordinary is not only the size of the settlement, but the ambition of its builders. From a distance, though today there is no true distance here, only the curtain of jungle, the massive structure known as La Danta dominates the horizon. La Danta is not a single pyramid, but a vast complex, a mountain of stone rising in layers, crowned with temples. By sheer volume of material, it surpasses even the Great Pyramid of Giza. To climb it is to walk not merely upon architecture, but upon a reshaped landscape, an artificial mountain that demanded the labor of countless thousands. The numbers are staggering. La Danta alone contains an estimated 18 million cubic meters of stone and fill, raised without beasts of burden, without the wheel, without iron tools. Its construction seems to whisper of a determination and knowledge that remains partly beyond our grasp. The blocks were quarried locally, lifted and carried by human hands, and yet placed with such precision that the structure has withstood centuries of storms and earthquakes. Around La Danta, other monumental groups rise: the Monos complex, the Tigre complex, each with their plazas, platforms, and ceremonial centers. Together they form the skeleton of a city that once stretched across more than 10 square miles, housing tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands, of people, as archaeologists began to map the site, aided in recent years by LiDAR scanning that strips away the forest canopy in digital form. The vision of El Mirador expanded beyond the central pyramids. They discovered networks of causeways, straight and raised, paved with white limestone. These sac biob linked not only the city's internal plazas, but reached outward, connecting El Mirador to other centers as far as 20 kilometers away. From the air, the causeways resemble arteries, pulsing outward from a heart of stone. They imply a level of planning, of coordination, and of integration that pushes the origins of Maya civilization back further than once thought. Beneath the grandeur lies another hidden mastery: water. The Maya lowlands are not rich in rivers or lakes, and survival in this environment depended on harnessing seasonal rains. At El Mirador, the remains of reservoirs and channels hint at an early sophistication in water management. These features are subtle, half-buried and broken, yet they reveal minds attentive not only to ritual grandeur, but also to the practicalities of sustaining life in the heart of the rainforest. And yet, with all this brilliance, the city did not endure. By the 2nd century of the Common Era, El Mirador was largely abandoned. The plazas that once rang with chants fell silent. The causeways that once glowed in the moonlight of ceremonies grew over with weeds. Its monumental temples, the artificial mountains of the Maya, became the sleeping hills of the jungle. 1,000 years would pass before other great Maya cities, Tikal, Palenque, Calakmul, rose to prominence. Between them yawns a void, a silence in the record, as if an entire chapter of civilization had been written, erased, and then begun again. Why? The questions remain without final answers. Some researchers see in the soil evidence of overexploitation, hillsides stripped for lime to plaster the monumental facades, forests felled to feed the fires of construction. Others detect signs of social stress, hieroglyphs that hint at warfare, defensive walls thrown up in haste, perhaps testimony to rivalries that burned the city from within. Still others point to drought, to cycles of climate that recur across centuries, reducing the lush green jungle to something harsher, less forgiving. And then there are those who wonder if El Mirador's collapse is less a failure than a forgetting, if its grandeur was not a beginning, but the echo of something older still. For even in its earliest days, El Mirador seems strangely complete. Its urban layout, its ceremonial architecture, its monumental art, all appear without the tentative steps of a civilization still learning. Instead, it arrives fully grown, already monumental, already cosmological in its scale. Some scholars suggest that knowledge flowed into El Mirador from earlier, still hidden centers, perhaps sites lost entirely beneath the jungle or erased by time. If that is so, then El Mirador may not be the cradle, but the air, preserving and amplifying wisdom, carried across forgotten centuries. Among its ruins, one can still see colossal stucco masks, faces of deities or mythic beings, Once painted in vivid reds and blacks, now pale and eroded, their features are at once familiar and otherworldly. Wide eyes and gaping mouths framed by curling ornaments. They stood flanking stairways, confronting all who ascended, embedding mythology into the very act of climbing. To ascend El Mirador was not only to rise in space, but to move through sacred narrative, each step part of a story written in stone. In the stillness of the present, the imagination lingers on what ceremonies once unfolded here. Did thousands gather in the plazas to watch rulers ascend the pyramids? Did torches blaze along the causeways at night, linking temples in rivers of firelight? Did the rulers of El Mirador look to the stars, aligning their temples with celestial events as their descendants would centuries later? The answers remain hazy, obscured by the jungle and by time, but the stones seem to hold memory in their silence. For those who seek forbidden histories, El Mirador is a place of deep resonance. Its very existence unsettles the linear progressions that textbooks often present. It asks, how could such a monumental city rise so early and then fall so completely? What knowledge was held here, and where did it go when the city died? Was it carried forward, quietly preserved in myths and rituals, waiting to re-emerge in later Maya centers? Or was it lost, like so many other fragments of humanity's story, buried under soil and silence, its memory carried only in whispers of gods and cycles of time? To walk in El Mirador today is to feel both presence and absence, the presence of scale, of ambition, of human hands shaping stone into something larger than life, and the absence of voices, of names, of the stories that once gave breath to the plazas. The jungle reclaims, but it also protects, and so the city waits, a lost metropolis of giants, still watching, still holding its secrets. A reminder that the past is not always behind us, but beneath us, hidden in plain sight. And as we leave El Mirador in thought, carrying the weight of its silence, the journey continues toward other cities, other ruins, and deeper mysteries, where the line between memory and myth grows ever thinner. Chapter 3, San Bartolo, the Murals of Lost Mythologies. Hidden deep within the Petén jungle of Guatemala, a chamber lay sealed in silence for more than 2 millennia. In 2001, chance and persistence brought it back to light. Beneath layers of stone and collapse, archaeologists uncovered a sanctuary whose walls still breathed with color. The murals of San Bartolo, painted with a hand both delicate and deliberate, stand today as one of the most profound windows into the mythic heart of the ancient Maya world. Unlike the imposing pyramids or monumental causeways of the great pre-classic cities, San Bartolo speaks in whispers rather than thunder. Its significance does not lie in size or grandeur, but in the rare survival of story. Here, on plastered walls dating to around 100 BCE, the Maya preserved their visions of creation, sacrifice, and cosmic order. The pigments, astonishingly vivid despite the centuries, show gods descending, maize sprouting from the earth, and blood flowing as the bridge between worlds. The chamber is not simply art. It is scripture in image, myth given form. In one panel, 4 young men offer their blood in ritual, each aligned with a cardinal direction, each participating in the ordering of the cosmos itself. In another, the maize god is reborn from a turtle shell, an image of life emerging from death, echoing a cycle as old as human memory. Scholars see in these murals the earliest known representation of Maya dynastic power, kings not only ruling by might, but legitimized by myth. One figure, crowned and resplendent, receives a headdress from a deity, suggesting that kingship itself was a cosmic inheritance, not a human invention. Yet beneath this political message lies something older, more haunting. The myths themselves do not appear for the first time here. They arrive already complete, already ancient. This raises a question too easily overlooked. Where did such imagery originate? Were these myths born among the lowland forests of the Maya? Or do they reach back further, to a forgotten horizon of belief, carried through oral memory across floods, migrations, and collapses long before the Maya ever carved stone? The creation scenes of San Bartolo seem to hum in resonance with stories from other civilizations. A world emerging from primordial waters recalls Mesopotamian and Egyptian cosmologies. The rebirth of maize echoes distant agricultural myths, where grain itself is a dying and resurrected god. The spilling of blood to nourish the universe finds unsettling parallels in Vedic sacrifices, and even the myth of Prometheus, punished for giving fire. These are not proofs of connection, but hints, as though humanity's earliest attempts to explain existence drew from a common well of memory. What makes San Bartolo so striking is not only the content, but the artistry. The lines are graceful, the compositions balanced with sophistication unexpected for their antiquity. Before this discovery, scholars assumed that such advanced painting belonged to the later classic period, centuries ahead. San Bartolo shattered that assumption. It revealed that the Maya, even at this early stage, had already achieved mastery of myth, of ritual, of image. Yet the murals themselves seem almost too fragile, too ephemeral to have survived. They remind us of how much has been lost. For every chamber preserved, how many walls have crumbled? For every pigment that still holds color, how many stories have faded to dust? The survival of San Bartolo feels less like chance and more like a message, as though the ancients wanted at least one echo of their beginnings to endure. And then, there is the question of suppression. For years, the murals remained outside mainstream narratives of Maya history. They were too disruptive, too early, too refined. They suggested that the Mayas' mythic and artistic achievements did not emerge suddenly in the classic age, but were rooted in a much deeper continuum. To acknowledge San Bartolo fully is to accept that we are peering into traditions whose origins lie in shadows beyond archaeology's reach. The bloodletting rituals depicted on the walls remind us of the Mayas' view of sacrifice not as cruelty, but as reciprocity. Life was sustained by life. The gods had given their own essence to form the world, and humanity, in turn, owed a debt. Blood was the currency of creation. It was not only royal duty, but cosmic responsibility. This perspective, unsettling to modern eyes, may preserve memories of ancient catastrophes, of a world in which survival itself felt precarious, where maintaining balance with the unseen was essential. And within the mural's mythic scenes lies a tantalizing question. Are these depictions mere imagination or encoded memory? Some have wondered if the images of floods and cosmic renewal preserve echoes of real cataclysms, inundations, collapses, or celestial events carried forward as myth. Were the creation scenes not only metaphors, but recollections of cycles when worlds ended and began anew? The Chamber of San Bartolo does not provide answers. It offers something more subtle, the invitation to listen, to see myth not as illusion, but as memory clothed in story, to recognize that these paintings are not frozen relics, but voices from a time when the veil between ritual and reality was thinner. Walking through San Bartolo today, the jungle presses close, vines creeping over stone, the air heavy with humidity and the scent of earth. To step into the chamber is to step outside of linear time. The walls seem to breathe, the colors pulse faintly in the dim light. One cannot help but wonder if the painters knew that their work would one day speak across centuries, carrying whispers of a world that modern history has tried to forget. The murals remain incomplete, fragments of a larger cycle, a story only partially revealed. Some panels are missing, others eroded beyond recognition. Perhaps they were destroyed deliberately, or perhaps nature simply claimed them back. What remains is enough to suggest grandeur, but not enough to reveal the full tapestry. The absence is itself a kind of message, that knowledge comes to us in pieces, and some truths are meant to stay hidden. As the chapter closes, we leave San Bartolo not with conclusions, but with impressions. The sense of standing at the threshold of myth. The jungle swallows the sight again. The colors retreat into shadow, but the images linger. Gods, kings, maize, and blood inscribed not only on plaster, but on the human imagination. The murals whisper of a past where myth and memory were one, where the line between human and divine blurred, and where art became a vessel for truths too great to be spoken. And so, we move onward, deeper into the Maya world, carrying with us the faint glow of San Bartolo's painted walls, a reminder that even in silence, the past continues to speak. Chapter 4, Tikal, the great jaguar city, in the heart of the Guatemalan rainforest, where the canopy stretches endlessly toward the horizon, and the air hums with the cries of unseen birds, lies a city once thought lost. Today it is known as Tikal. To the ancient Maya, it was Yax Mutal, the first Mutal, the city of the jaguar, where kings ruled beneath temples that reached for the heavens. At first glance, Tikal appears as a scattering of stone pyramids rising above the forest floor, isolated monuments reclaimed by silence. Yet in truth, these visible temples are only fragments. For centuries, the jungle concealed its true scale, wrapping it in vines, burying it under soil, hiding it from history. Only in recent years, through the patient work of archaeologists and the piercing vision of LiDAR technology, has Tikal revealed itself. What emerged was staggering. Beneath the dense foliage, thousands upon thousands of structures lay mapped. Palaces, causeways, terraces, defensive walls, and reservoirs. The city was not merely a ceremonial center, but a vast metropolis, housing more than 100,000 souls, breathing with life in the heart of a fragile rainforest. The imagination struggles to see it as it once was. Wide plazas filled with people in vibrant garments, incense rising in coils toward the sky, the sound of conch shells echoing through stone corridors. At the city's center stood Temple 1, the temple of the Great Jaguar, a funerary pyramid where King Jasur Chankawil was entombed around 734 CE. Across from it, Temple 2 rose in harmony, forming a dialogue of stone between ruler and consort. These temples were not simply tombs, but anchors in the cosmic order, linking the living city with the cycles of gods and ancestors. Tikal was more than architecture, it was power, contested and defended through centuries of dynastic rivalry. Its history is written in stelae, tall stone monuments carved with images of kings in elaborate regalia, surrounded by glyphs that recount their victories, alliances, and blood sacrifices. The dynasties of Tikal waged wars with neighboring cities such as Calakmul, Karakol, and Dos Pilas. These were not minor skirmishes, but cosmic struggles, where the capture of a rival king could shift the balance of heaven and earth. For the Maya, politics and spirituality were never separate. The outcome of war determined not only territorial power, but the favor of the gods themselves. The rulers of Tikal aligned themselves with the celestial order. They performed rituals timed to solstices, eclipses, and the sacred calendar, their authority legitimated by the turning of the skies. Some stelae depict kings piercing their tongues or genitals, offering blood as nourishment for the universe. Through these acts, they became mediators between realms, binding their city to the fabric of creation. And yet, for all its grandeur, the question remains, how could such a population endure in a rainforest that offers little in the way of fertile soil? The answer lies partly in ingenuity. The Maya transformed the landscape into a network of reservoirs and canals, capturing rainwater to sustain life through the long dry season. Some of these reservoirs were immense, lined with plaster to prevent seepage, engineered with a precision that reveals not only technical knowledge, but a deep respect for water as a sacred substance. Recent studies have shown traces of blue-green algae within these reservoirs, suggesting that by the later centuries they became polluted, undrinkable. What was once a source of life may have turned into a slow poison, weakening the very foundation of the city. LiDAR has also revealed terraced fields and causeways stretching far beyond the central plazas, signs of a population that reshaped the land to feed itself. Yet even with such innovation, the balance was precarious. The rainforest, abundant in appearance, is fragile in truth. Its soils, once stripped, cannot easily renew themselves. A population as vast as Tikal's required careful stewardship, and when climate shifted or wars disrupted stability, the system faltered. By the 9th century CE, the great city began to fall silent. Construction ceased. Monuments were abandoned mid-carving. The dynasties that had once claimed divine authority disappeared into the forest. What remains is the great mystery of the Maya collapse. Droughts likely played a role, as climate evidence shows extended dry periods in the 9th century. War too weakened alliances, fracturing the network of city-states. Resource exhaustion may have compounded the crisis, as fields and reservoirs could no longer sustain the population. Yet no single explanation suffices. The fall of Tikal is not a simple ending, but a convergence of many forces, natural and human, visible and unseen. To walk through Tikal today is to step into a place where echoes linger. The temples rise above the jungle canopy, their stone stairways steep and eroded, leading towards summits where priests once observed the stars. Howler monkeys now reign where kings once stood, their calls filling the dawn with a sound both primeval and haunting. The plazas are empty, yet in silence one can almost hear the shuffle of thousands of feet, the low hum of chants, the crackle of torches burning in ritual procession. The collapse of Tikal does not erase its legacy. Even in ruin, the city remains a testament to human resilience and fragility, to the brilliance of a people who mapped the heavens and mastered stone, yet whose world could still unravel. For the Maya, time itself was cyclical. Civilizations rose, fell, and would rise again. Perhaps Tikal's decline was not an end, but a turning of the wheel, a reminder that all grandeur rests upon the shifting ground of earth and sky. Archaeologists continue to uncover its secrets. Beneath the plazas, tombs reveal the treasures of kings, jade masks, obsidian blades, vessels painted with scenes of myth. Each artifact is a fragment of story, a whisper from lives once lived in devotion to gods and ancestors. The city still holds mysteries, tunnels unexplored, glyphs not yet deciphered, structures still hidden beneath centuries of growth. And so, Tikal endures as both ruin and revelation. A city of jaguars, kings and gods, standing in the balance between memory and oblivion. Its story is not closed, but suspended, waiting for those who would listen. As we leave the Great Plaza, the jungle slowly closes in. The pyramids recede into shadow, their outlines softened by the green embrace of vines and branches. The air grows heavy again with silence. Yet the impression remains of a city that was once alive with fire and song, and of the questions it leaves behind. How did such brilliance arise in a land so delicate? What truths are still hidden beneath the forest floor? And why, when the city fell silent, did memory itself nearly fade, leaving us only fragments to piece together the vastness of what was? The answers remain elusive, but as the ancient Maya knew, silence is not emptiness. It is part of the cycle, part of the story, and in that silence, the great jaguar city continues to breathe. Chapter 5. Calakmul, the Serpent Kingdom. Beneath the dense canopy of the Calakmul Biosphere Reserve, the jungle breathes in slow rhythm, cloaking the ruins of a once mighty city in silence. For centuries, this hidden metropolis slept undisturbed, its colossal structures swallowed by the relentless green tide of the rainforest. Only in recent decades has its true scope come into focus, an urban expanse rivaling the greatest of the Maya world, with temples, palaces, reservoirs, and causeways stretching across the lowlands. Archaeologists have mapped more than 6,000 structures, each a fragment of the Serpent Kingdom's story, each a whisper of an empire now lost. Calakmul was no ordinary city. It was the seat of the Carnal dynasty, the Snake Kings, whose emblem glyph carried a weight of fear and authority across the Maya world. From the heart of this forest kingdom, dynastic rulers extended their influence over vast networks of cities and vassals. For centuries, Calakmul stood locked in rivalry with Tikal, the great jaguar city to the west. Their struggle was not merely for land or tribute, but for cosmic legitimacy, for control over the sacred order that bound kings to gods and mortals to the cycles of the heavens. The architecture itself reflected this ambition. Towering pyramids, their limestone steps rising above the canopy, were not merely monuments, but stages for ritual, war, and divine proclamation. At Structure 2, the city's largest pyramid, generations of rulers added new layers of stone, burying older temples within. This act of continual renewal mirrored the serpent itself, shedding skin, growing larger, reborn through cycles of death and regeneration. From the summit, the Snake Kings gazed out over a sea of green, asserting dominion not just over land and people, but over time itself. Throughout the city, serpent imagery wound its way across stelae, murals, and carved altars. Fanged mouths devoured kings, feathered bodies coiled through cosmic scenes, and rulers adorned themselves with serpent headdresses that fused human power with the otherworldly. In Maya cosmology, the serpent was not a mere animal, but a bridge, its sinuous form connecting sky, earth, and underworld. The vision serpent, rising in smoke and incense, was believed to carry ancestors and deities into the realm of the living. By adopting the serpent as their emblem, the Carnal dynasty proclaimed themselves not only earthly rulers, but mediators of the cosmic order. Yet Calakmul's greatness was not carved in stone alone. It was written in the subtle art of politics. The Snake Kings mastered the use of dynastic propaganda, erecting stelae that glorified victories, alliances, and divine sanction. Through marriage ties and ritual exchanges, they built a web of influence that stretched across the lowlands. Vassal cities bore the mark of the serpent, acknowledging the supremacy of Calakmul's kings. Even distant rulers recognized the weight of its power, their authority bolstered, or broken, by the will of the serpent throne. But power invited conflict. The rivalry with Tikal became a saga spanning centuries, with battles fought not only on fields, but within temples and plazas. Records speak of captures, defeats, and shifting alliances, each side striving to bend the destiny of the lowlands to their will. At times, Calakmul emerged triumphant, forcing Tikal into decline. At others, the balance shifted, and the Serpent Kingdom felt the bite of the Jaguar's claws. The two cities, locked in a cosmic struggle, mirrored the dualities that filled Maya cosmology. Life and death, light and darkness, order and chaos. Beneath this grand theatre of kingship, however, lay a fragile foundation. Calakmul, like Tikal, stood within a rainforest that could not easily sustain vast populations. With tens of thousands living within its orbit, the city required ingenious systems of survival. Reservoirs collected seasonal rains, canals guided the lifeblood of water, and terraces shaped the land into fields of maize. These systems revealed the Maya's deep knowledge of ecology, their ability to coax abundance from thin soils and fleeting rains. Yet they also exposed a vulnerability, for in times of drought or disruption, the balance between city and environment could swiftly collapse. Archaeological layers tell of both prosperity and strain. Monuments grew in size and number, yet later stelae often appear unfinished, their carvings faint as though resources or will had faltered. Burials of kings grew more elaborate, even as signs of social stress multiplied in the common dwellings around them. The city, vast as it was, carried within it the seeds of its own fragility. By the late 8th and early 9th centuries, the Serpent Kingdom faltered. The once loud plazas fell silent. Stelae ceased to bear the names of kings, and the forest began its slow reclamation. Calakmul, like Tikal, entered collapse. The reasons remain cloaked in mystery. Some point to prolonged drought, weakening the reservoirs and starving the fields. Others speak of political fragmentation, the great alliances of the Snake Kings unraveling into chaos. Still others wonder if both cities fell victim to a greater, hidden catastrophe, a convergence of environmental stress, internal strife, and perhaps forces still beyond our comprehension. Today, walking through Calakmul is to step into an echo of greatness. The jungle hums with life, yet beneath the vines and roots, the stones remain, silent guardians of a lost age. Structure 2 rises above the treetops, offering a view that has changed little since the time of the kings. The serpent glyph, carved into weathered stelae, lingers as a reminder of a dynasty that once claimed to mediate between heaven and earth. Calakmul's story is not one of simple rise and fall, but of cycles. Serpentine, eternal. Its monuments still breathe with myth. Its silence still carries the weight of cosmic ambition. And as we contemplate its ruins, we are left with questions that reach far beyond the forest canopy. Did the Snake Kings inherit traditions older than the Maya themselves? Fragments of pre-flood cosmologies, carried through time and recast in stone. Did their obsession with serpents reflect not only local myth, but a universal archetype, echoing the dragon, the naga, the feathered serpent of countless cultures? What remains certain is that Calakmul was more than a city. It was a vision-made stone, a kingdom that dared to embody the serpent's eternal coil. And though its kings are gone, their legacy lingers in silence, in stone, and in the unseen memory of the forest. Here, in the heart of Campeche, the serpent still waits, coiled in ruins, whispering of a kingdom that once commanded both fear and reverence, then vanished, leaving behind only questions. To understand the endurance and eventual vulnerability of Calakmul, one must first consider its lifeblood, water. The city rose in a landscape without great rivers, a place where rainfall was seasonal and often uncertain. To survive, the Maya engineered reservoirs of staggering size and complexity, some covering many hectares. These aguadas, lined with plaster and maintained with precision, became sacred pools, both practical and symbolic, representing the gift of Chak, the rain god, and the sustaining breath of the earth itself. Around them, causeways stretched outward like veins, linking distant settlements and binding communities to the serpent throne. Excavations reveal that these systems were not static, but continually adapted. Channels guided runoff from plazas into the reservoirs. Terraces caught the thin soils for cultivation, and raised fields were carved from swampy depressions. Such ingenuity demonstrates that the Snake Kings presided over not only a political empire, but an ecological one, commanding the very flow of water as a statement of divine legitimacy. Yet when the skies withheld rain for too long, no ritual could refill the reservoirs, and the weight of empire pressed hard upon its foundations. Equally revealing are the city's inscriptions. The carved stelae of Calakmul are among the most numerous in the Maya world, though time and erosion have obscured many details. Those that remain speak of enthronements, alliances, and wars fought far beyond the city's forested heartland. They record the names of kings such as Uxmal and Chichen Itzá, remembered as the Great Consolidator, who brought vassal states under the serpent banner during the 7th century. His reign marked the zenith of Calakmul's power, when the dynasty seemed invincible, its reach extending into the highlands and across the Peten Basin. But the inscriptions are also selective, crafted with intent. They glorify victories and suppress defeats, shaping memory as much as recording history. A monument erected might tell of a captured king paraded in ritual humiliation, yet remain silent about the losses suffered in return. In this, Calakmul reveals the power of narrative, the ability to weave stone and symbol into a tapestry of authority. Archaeologists and epigraphers, piecing together these fragments, see not only the grandeur of the Snake Kings, but the careful construction of myth, where truth and propaganda intertwine until they become inseparable. As the centuries unfolded, the monuments grew quieter, fewer stelae were raised, and many of those left unfinished, as though the sculptors had abandoned their tools before the story could be completed. This silence mirrors a deeper unraveling. Population estimates suggest that by the height of its power, Calakmul may have been home to 50,000 or more inhabitants, sustained by an even larger hinterland. Such density, in a fragile environment, would have been sustainable only under delicate balance. When that balance tipped through drought, political turmoil, or shifting trade routes, the weight of the city pressed against limits that could no longer be stretched. Chapter 6. Copan, the hieroglyphic stairway. In the western valleys of present-day Honduras, embraced by mountains and nourished by the waters of the Copan River, lies one of the most remarkable centers of the Maya world. Here, amid fertile soil and rolling hills, the city of Copan rose as a seat of learning, artistry, and cosmic ambition. Its plazas and temples seem to exhale memory, as though the very stones were carved not only to honor kings, but to preserve the rhythm of time itself. Among the ruins, stelae stand tall and solemn, each one a portrait in stone. They are unlike those found anywhere else in the Maya realm, sculptures of astonishing detail, where rulers are transformed into living deities, clothed in headdresses that stretch toward the heavens, adorned with symbols of cosmic order. Their faces gaze outward, timeless and unmoving, yet infused with an energy that feels almost animate. The artisans of Copan were masters, chiseling not merely stone, but the very idea of kingship. At the heart of this sacred landscape lies the hieroglyphic stairway. Rising up the side of Temple 26, it is the longest single Maya inscription ever discovered. More than 2,000 glyph blocks once climbed its steps, forming a dynastic record that stretches back into myth and memory. Each stone is a fragment of a narrative, recording enthronements, wars, alliances, and offerings to the gods. Yet time has not been kind. Many of the blocks were displaced in ancient days, perhaps during a hasty reconstruction, leaving the text fragmented, its sequence broken. What remains is a puzzle, an epic story scattered across steps, where scholars must tread carefully, reassembling history piece by piece. Even in its incompleteness, the hieroglyphic stairway reveals the mind of Copan. Here was a city obsessed with continuity, with anchoring the present to an eternal lineage. Its rulers traced their descent to the founding king, Kinich Yaxkuk Mo, who arrived in the valley in the early 5th century. His name, meaning sun-faced Quetzalcoatl, carried both celestial and earthly resonance, linking him to divine authority and the vibrant natural world of the tropics. He was remembered not only as a conqueror, but as a culture bearer, a figure who brought with him the rituals and symbols that bound Copan into the greater Maya cosmos. Through the centuries, his successors expanded the city into a jewel of architecture and intellectual life. Observatories were aligned with celestial events, allowing priests to track the movements of Venus and the cycles of the sun and moon. Ball courts were constructed, not only as arenas for ritual play, but as symbolic stages where the dance of life and death was reenacted beneath the watch of the gods. Murals and stucco facades shimmered with vibrant colors, telling stories of creation and renewal. Copan, more than most Maya centers, seems to have pursued knowledge with fervor, knowledge of time, of astronomy, of the sacred patterns that underlay existence. Yet beneath the beauty lies unease. Archaeology reveals a society of contrasts, brilliance entwined with fragility, reverence shadowed by cruelty. Excavations have uncovered mass graves, deposits of sacrificed individuals whose lives were offered to sustain the city's divine order. Among them, women and children, silent testimonies that behind the gilded veneer of kingship, the cost of grandeur was paid in blood. Copan's rulers themselves appear as both visionaries and prisoners of their own ambition. One of the most striking kings was Uxmal, known to scholars as 18 Rabbit. His reign in the early 8th century was marked by artistic flourishing. The great stelae of Copan, carved during his rule, remain masterpieces of Maya art, capturing both the majesty of kingship and the intricacies of divine symbolism. Yet even as he raised monuments to eternity, his power was fragile. In 738 CE, he was captured and executed by the ruler of Quirigua, a smaller city once under Copan's sway. The beheading of 18 Rabbit shocked the Maya world, and though Copan endured, the loss revealed how even the mightiest dynasties could falter in the shifting currents of alliance and war. Beyond politics, the land itself may have strained under the weight of the city's ambition. Scholars have found evidence of deforestation around Copan, signs that the fertile valley was overworked to sustain its growing population. Hillsides stripped of trees may have led to erosion, reducing the agricultural bounty that had once made the valley so desirable. Climate records suggest periods of drought that would have tested even the most carefully managed fields. In these shadows, the stelae take on new meaning. Their grandeur, their insistence on continuity, may not have been signs of confidence, but of desperation. A ruling class proclaiming stability in a world that was already beginning to crack. Walking through the site today, one can feel both the weight of brilliance and the whisper of decline. The hieroglyphic stairway rises silently, its broken text both a monument and a warning. The stelae, though eroded, still carry the presence of kings who sought to shape eternity. The ball court lies empty, its echoes of ritual play long faded into the rustle of leaves. And yet, there is still life in Copan. Scarlet macaws, sacred birds of the Maya, wheel through the sky above the ruins, their crimson feathers catching the sun. They seem to carry with them a fragment of the city's soul, a reminder that memory is never entirely lost. The story of Copan invites questions without answers. Was its intellectual brilliance enough to shield it from the weight of sacrifice, rivalry, and ecological strain? Or did its achievements mask a deeper fragility, a society that reached too far toward eternity, while the ground beneath it slowly gave way? The stones do not speak their secrets easily. They leave us fragments, glyphs half vanished, narratives broken, lives remembered only in ritual context. And yet, within the silence, there is a kind of truth that all human striving, no matter how divine it claims to be, is bound by cycles of growth and decline. As evening settles over the valley, the ruins grow hushed. The river flows softly, winding its way past the once great city. In the dim light, the stairway and stelae seem less like remnants of the past than like guardians of memory, reminding us that every civilization carries within it both its zenith and its shadow. Copan endures not as a fallen city, but as a testament, a place where beauty and fragility are carved side by side, where time itself was inscribed upon stone, and where the silence of collapse lingers like a question waiting to be asked again. Chapter 7, Palanque, the Temple of Inscriptions, in the mist-shrouded highlands of Chiapas, where the jungle breathes with ancient humidity and the air is alive with birdsong. A city of stone rises like a dream. Palenque, known to its original inhabitants as Lacamha, Big Water, rests among the folds of the Sierra Madre. Here, rivers and springs emerge from the limestone earth, feeding waterfalls that cascade down emerald cliffs, filling the valley with the music of flowing water. It was in this place, where nature and architecture blend seamlessly, that the Maya built one of their most elegant and enigmatic cities. The structures of Palanque differ from the towering pyramids of the northern lowlands. Here the stone is softer, the ornamentation more refined, the proportions more human. Reliefs depict kings and gods with delicate precision, their faces expressive, their gestures filled with meaning. Roof combs rise against the forest canopy, like carved crowns set upon temples, and at the heart of this sacred landscape stands the most haunting monument of all, the Temple of Inscriptions. From the outside, it appears as a stepped pyramid, its 9 terraces echoing the 9 layers of the Maya underworld, Xibalba. A grand stairway climbs toward a temple chamber above, where long inscriptions line the walls. These glyphs, carefully carved, record not only the reigns of kings, but the deeper cycles of time, prophecies, rituals, and connections between rulers and the gods they embodied. It was from these inscriptions that the temple took its name. For centuries, the Maya descendants who lived in the region told stories of hidden chambers within the pyramid. Yet it was not until the mid-20th century that archaeologists, guided by subtle clues, discovered a sealed passageway descending into the heart of the structure. What they found changed our understanding of Maya kingship forever. Deep beneath the temple, a stone stairway leads into the silence of a crypt. At its center rests a massive sarcophagus, cut from a single block of limestone and weighing more than 20 tons. Within lay the remains of Kinich Janab Pakal, known today simply as Pakal the Great, one of the most celebrated rulers of the Maya world. His reign stretched for nearly 70 years, beginning in the early 7th century and lasting into old age, a rarity in an era when rulers often fell to war or disease. Pakal's tomb was not a simple resting place. Around his body were placed offerings, jade ornaments, shells, and the bones of sacrificed companions meant to accompany him into eternity. Most striking of all was the jade death mask, fashioned from countless mosaic pieces fitted together with exquisite precision. Its luminous green face still gazes upward, as if the king's spirit had been reborn into the eternal cycle of life and maze. But it is the lid of the sarcophagus that has drawn the most fascination and controversy. Carved with extraordinary detail, it depicts Pakal at the moment of transformation. He appears reclined, suspended between worlds, his body poised above a strange device. Around him, symbols of the cosmic tree rise, connecting the underworld, the earth, and the heavens. For Maya scholars, the scene represents the passage of the king's soul through the cycles of death and rebirth, his body descending into Xibalba, while his essence ascends along the world tree into the realm of the gods. Yet not all see only myth. To some, the image suggests something else entirely. Pakal at the controls of a machine, his hands reaching toward levers, his feet pressing against pedals, flames or exhaust flowing from the base beneath him. The carving has been interpreted by alternative researchers as an ancient memory of space travel, preserved in stone. Could it be that the Maya kings encoded in their art not only symbolic journeys of the soul, but echoes of forbidden technologies remembered from an earlier age? Whether one accepts the orthodox explanation or the more speculative interpretations, the lid remains an enigma. It speaks across centuries, its meaning layered like the temple itself, drawing the viewer into a space where myth, memory, and possibility converge. The mysteries of Palenque do not end with Pakal's tomb. The city itself was a marvel of engineering. Archaeologists have uncovered sophisticated water systems coursing beneath the plazas, stone aqueducts that redirected springs into controlled channels, preventing flooding while supplying fresh water to the city. Some conduits even seem to have been designed to create pressure, perhaps producing fountains that rose in shimmering arcs amid the courtyards. In a region of heavy rains and seasonal torrents, Palenque's mastery of water was not only practical, but sacred. Water was life, water was fertility, water was the voice of the gods. To shape and control it was to partake in divine creation. The inscriptions that line the temple walls expand this vision further. They trace Pakal's lineage back through centuries, connecting him to ancestral rulers and mythological events that reach into the deep time of creation. Dates carved into stone extend far before his birth, recounting cosmic cycles measured in thousands of years. Palenque's scribes were not merely chroniclers of kings, but custodians of time itself. They placed human life within an infinite pattern, where rulers were but actors in an eternal script. And yet, beneath this elegance lies uncertainty. Some scholars question the nature of Pakal's burial itself. Was the tomb prepared during his lifetime, or was it hastily constructed after his death? Was the jade mask crafted to preserve his visage, or to transform him into the living embodiment of the maize god, reborn with each harvest. The bones found within the sarcophagus show signs of age, yet debates linger about whether the remains match the king described in inscriptions. The silence of the crypt refuses to yield a single, definitive answer. The jungle around Palenque presses close, reclaiming what was once a vibrant metropolis. Howler monkeys call from the treetops, their cries reverberating through the ruins like echoes of ancient chants. Moss creeps across the carved facades, blurring the faces of kings and gods. And still, the Temple of Inscriptions endures, its 9 terraces rising above the canopy, a stone mountain where myth and memory converge. In the stillness of twilight, when mist drifts between the trees and the rivers swell with rain, Palenque feels alive, as though Pakal himself still walks the corridors of his city, as though the lid of his sarcophagus is less a tomb marker than a doorway, waiting for the right eyes to see what lies beyond. The question remains, was the artistry of Palenque purely symbolic, or did it preserve, in veiled form, a memory that reaches beyond myth, an inheritance of knowledge too profound to be fully grasped? In the silence of the temple, no answer is given, only the steady presence of stone carved with devotion, whispering that some truths are not to be solved, but contemplated. And so, the Temple of Inscriptions remains both a monument and a riddle, an eternal threshold between the known and the unknown, where water still flows, where the jungle breathes, and where a king rests beneath a stone lid that continues to stir wonder across the centuries. Chapter 8, Uxmal. The Pyramid of the Magician Deep in the Puig Hills of Yucatan, where the limestone ridges rise like the bones of the earth itself, lies Uxmal, a city that still whispers with a sense of enchantment. Unlike the soaring monuments of Tikal or the jungle-hidden temples of Calakmul, Uxmal greets the eye with an elegance that feels almost otherworldly. Its walls are smoother, its lines softer, its balance more refined, and at its heart rises a structure that has no parallel in the Maya world, the Pyramid of the Magician. Unlike most Maya pyramids, which were square and stepped with sharp, angular geometry, this monument curves in an oval form. Its sides bend as though shaped by some unseen hand, defying the symmetry of its time. It rises in layers, each one built at a different moment, yet fused together into a seamless whole. From a distance, it does not look like the work of countless laborers with stone tools. It looks, instead, as though it had always been there, grown from the very earth, awaiting only the myths that would explain it. And the myths came. The Maya told stories of a sorcerer, a magician child born of an egg, who raised the pyramid in a single night by the power of his chants. To the ancient inhabitants, Uxmal was not merely a city of stone. It was a place touched by forces beyond human craft, where architecture itself became a continuation of myth. But myth was not separate from science in the Maya world. Beneath the stories, archaeologists have found alignments that reveal a deeper intention. The Pyramid of the Magician is oriented toward the cycles of Venus, the planet that obsessed Maya astronomers. Its stairways and sightlines frame the rising of the morning star and mark the solstices with precision. In the interplay of stone and sky, the building becomes a kind of cosmic instrument, capturing the rhythms of time. Venus was not a gentle symbol to the Maya. It was a harbinger of war, a celestial omen tied to sacrifice and struggle. Kings planned their campaigns by its appearances. Priests read its light as a script of destiny. That the Pyramid of the Magician was so carefully aligned with Venus speaks to its role not only as a temple, but as a gateway between human order and cosmic will. When one ascended its curving steps, one entered into the drama of the heavens themselves. Yet, the design of Uxmal carries echoes that seem older than the classic Maya. The city's style, known as Puig, is distinct. Its smooth veneer walls, mosaic friezes, and serpent imagery suggest an evolution of traditions long embedded in the limestone hills. Some researchers believe Uxmal's architects were inheritors of knowledge passed down from earlier, forgotten cultures, threads of memory woven into new forms. The oval pyramid, so unlike the square geometries of the Maya, may be a surviving fragment of something older, preserved like a fossil of stone within the later city. Standing before the Pyramid of the Magician today, one cannot help but feel this layering of time. Each stage of construction added a new face to the structure, yet never erased the older one beneath. It is as though the Maya built not to replace, but to enfold, to honor a memory even as they reshaped it. The pyramid is less a monument to a single age than a palimpsest of generations, each leaving its mark in stone, while allowing the past to remain alive within the present. The surrounding city reinforces this sense of harmony between myth and order. The nunnery quadrangle, with its elaborate facades of masks and latticework, faces the pyramid with an elegance that seems almost theatrical. The governor's palace stretches across its platform with a precision that scholars have shown aligns with the movements of Venus as well. Uxmal was not built at random. It was staged like a cosmic drama, where buildings served as actors and the sky itself provided the script. And yet, as with all Maya cities, the beauty of Uxmal carries shadows. Behind its decorative facades lie hints of the burdens carried by those who lived beneath the elite. The magnificence of the friezes, with their endless rows of chak masks, the rain god, suggests both devotion and desperation. In this dry land, rain was never guaranteed. The Puk Hills hold no rivers, no cenotes like those of Chichen Itzá. Water had to be gathered in reservoirs, channeled with skill, preserved with reverence. Every mask of chak carved into the stone was a prayer made permanent, an appeal to the sky itself to give life. Perhaps this is why the myth of the magician feels so powerful here. To create a pyramid overnight was not only an act of wonder, it was an answer to need. It was a declaration that the city stood under the protection of forces greater than drought, greater than time. To believe the pyramid was born in a single night was to believe that the gods themselves had shaped Uxmal. Today, the pyramid stands weathered, softened by centuries of wind and rain, but its form remains haunting. The oval curves still rise against the horizon, strange and unique among Maya structures. For those who walk its base, the silence of the Puk Hills carries the weight of all that has passed. The chants of priests, the footsteps of kings, the whispered fears of farmers watching the skies for rain, all linger here, as though the stone itself remembers. And in that memory, a question lingers. Was Uxmal simply the flowering of Maya genius, a city of art, science, and ritual, or was it something more? A preservation of knowledge carried from a time before the Maya, echoes of civilizations older still, whose traces lie buried beneath layers of legend. The pyramid of the magician stands as a riddle in stone, one that refuses to be solved, inviting us instead to listen, to wonder, and to walk more slowly through the silence of its halls. The Puk Hills fall quiet as the light fades across the pyramid. Its curves catch the last of the sun, glowing softly before night descends. Venus will soon rise, as it has for millennia, over the same horizon, casting its pale light across the ancient stones. And once more, the city of Uxmal will seem alive, a place where myth and science, past and present, human and divine, all meet in the shadows of the pyramid of the magician. Chapter 9. Chichen Itzá, the feathered serpent, descends in the northern lowlands of the Yucatan Peninsula, where the limestone earth lies dry and rivers flow only beneath the ground, rises one of the most haunting and enduring monuments of the ancient world. Chichen Itzá, the city of water sorcerers, stands at the meeting point of myth and mathematics, ritual and empire. Its stones have seen centuries of rain, centuries of silence, yet when the equinox sun falls across them, they still awaken with a vision that seems alive, the descent of the feathered serpent. At the center of this city, upon a broad plaza, rises El Castillo, the temple of Kukulkan. To the modern eye, it is a pyramid, stepped and commanding, but to the Maya, it was more than a structure. It was a calendar carved in stone, a bridge between the earth and the heavens. 91 steps rise on each of its four sides, joined by the platform at the summit. Together, they total 365, the number of days in the solar year. Each stair was not only a path upward, but a marker of time, a physical embodiment of cycles that bound sky to soil, season to harvest, life to death. Twice each year, during the equinox, the sun casts its light across the pyramid in such a way that a shadow serpent seems to slither down its northern staircase. The illusion is precise, deliberate. As the sun descends, triangular shadows fall along the balustrade, linking with the serpent heads carved at the base. For a few fleeting moments, the stone itself comes alive. To those who once gathered in the plaza, this was not a trick of geometry. It was Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity, lord of sky and earth. descending to bless his people, to ensure the turning of seasons and the continuity of time. The serpent is a symbol both Maya and Toltec, and here at Chichen Itzá we see the union of those worlds. The city rose to power in the post-classic era, centuries after the great dynasties of the southern lowlands had fallen, but its architects drew from many traditions. Toltec warriors brought with them the imagery of Tula, colonnades, chacmuls reclining in stone, the fierce face of Tlahuizcalpantecutli, the morning star god. The Maya traditions remained as well. The obsession with astronomy, the worship of rain gods, the reverence for cenotes as portals to the underworld. The fusion of these worlds gave Chichen Itzá a character unlike any other city. It was a place of blending, but also of tension. In the sacred cenote, archaeologists have found offerings of gold, jade, obsidian blades, and human remains. The cenote was more than a well, it was a gateway. Here the Maya cast treasures and lives into the deep green waters, sending them as messages to Chark, the rain god. For the farmers of the Yucatan, survival itself depended on water drawn from these hidden pools. To neglect the gods was to risk famine. To anger them was to invite drought. And so the cenote became both altar and abyss, where beauty and terror mingled. The excavations of the early 20th century revealed skeletons of men, women and children weighted with ornaments, cast into the cenote as offerings. Some show marks of ritual death before being consigned to the water. Others may have drowned in the descent itself. Each life given was a plea, each sacrifice a reminder that Chichen Itzá, for all its brilliance, was also a city shadowed by desperation. Walking through the ruins today, one passes from one world to another in stone. There is the Great Ball Court, the largest in all Mesoamerica. Its walls rise 7 meters high, carved with reliefs of players in elaborate gear. But here, victory did not bring glory in the sense we understand it. The game was sacred, a reenactment of cosmic struggle. In its imagery, we see decapitated players, blood flowing, serpents rising from wounds. To the Maya, death in the ballgame was not an end, but a passage, a transformation that echoed the descent of the sun and the rebirth of the maize. Beyond the ball court stands the Temple of the Warriors, its colonnades stretching in rows of shadowed pillars. Upon its platform lies the chacmul, the reclining figure with a bowl upon its chest, awaiting offerings. Here too we see the Toltec hand, the influence of Tula, where warriors and sacrifice were central. And yet, the carvings of feathered serpents, the astronomical alignments of structures, root the city firmly in Maya cosmology. Chichen Itzá was not one culture imposing upon another, but a weaving, a fusion that created something neither wholly Maya nor wholly Toltec, but uniquely its own. Still, questions remain. Was this blending an act of strength, a way to preserve wisdom by combining traditions? Or was it born of collapse, a desperate grasp at power by those who knew their world was shifting? The post-classic era was not an age of certainty. The great cities of the southern lowlands lay abandoned. The jungle reclaimed temples once filled with kings. Chichen Itzá may have risen as a response, a place where knowledge was gathered, where traditions were fused, in an attempt to keep the sacred flame alive. The serpent shadow of El Castillo tells us that the city still knew the language of the stars. Its cenotes tell us that the old fears remained. Its carvings tell us of wars fought, prisoners taken, gods appeased. And yet, in the balance of these elements, Chichen Itzá endured, not as a memory of decline, but as one of the most iconic symbols of Mesoamerican civilization. Even today, when the equinox comes and the sun touches the pyramid, thousands gather to watch the shadow serpent descend. Cameras flash, voices rise, but in the quiet spaces between, one can still feel what the ancient Maya felt. The awe of stone and light, the sense that something larger than humanity has chosen, for a moment, to reveal itself. The feathered serpent slides slowly down the stairs, then dissolves into darkness as the sun sets. The illusion ends, but the memory lingers, as it has for centuries. Chichen Itzá remains a city of questions, a city of blending, a city where myth and stone, sacrifice and science, despair and resilience are all bound together. Was it a triumph of synthesis, or a final prayer against the silence of decline? The answer lies somewhere in the shadows, perhaps at the bottom of the cenote, perhaps in the light of Venus, perhaps only in the silence of the stones themselves. And so the city waits, as all ancient cities do. The plaza grows quiet. The jungle gathers its night sounds. and above the pyramid, the stars turn in their eternal rhythm. El Castillo still counts the days, the serpent will still descend, and Chichen Itzá, though long abandoned, still holds the breath of worlds that rose and fell, and the memory of those who looked to the sky, searching for the feathered serpent's return. Chapter 10. Bonampak. The murals of blood and war in the humid jungles of Chiapas, where mist lingers like breath upon the ancient trees, lies a city whose memory is not carved in stone alone, but painted upon the very walls of its sanctuaries. Bonampak, a name that in Maya means painted walls, is unlike any other site in the Maya world. For here, the voices of the past are not only whispered through glyphs and architecture, but revealed in a startling explosion of color, form, and narrative. Within the Temple of the Murals, built in the late 8th century, the walls are alive with images that have outlasted kingdoms. The pigments drawn from earth and mineral still cling to plaster as if time itself hesitated to erode them. Across these walls unfolds a story, not of quiet contemplation beneath the stars, nor of serene priests marking celestial cycles, but of blood, of war, of human cries etched into eternity. 3 chambers, each a canvas of life and death. The first shows the pageantry of rulers, the delicate attire of nobles, the music of conch shells and drums, a celebration perhaps of a child born into the royal line, draped in feathers and jade. Yet already the undertone is set, a world of hierarchy, where splendor exists beside subjugation. The second chamber shifts like a storm cloud. Warriors surge in formation, their shields alive with painted emblems, their spears thrust against captives. Here the Maya world reveals itself in conflict and conquest. Prisoners, stripped of rank, kneel before victors. Their faces are not anonymous but detailed, anguished, human. And then, in a series of chilling images, the rituals of bloodletting unfold. Fingertips sliced, tongues pierced, captives bound and awaiting sacrifice. Blood was not only spilled upon the ground, but offered as a sacred currency, binding the human to the divine. In the third chamber, the aftermath, nobles observe the captive's humiliation, attendants fan incense, musicians sound the rhythms of ceremony, and in the center, the violence becomes sanctified. A ruler, adorned with feathers, presents the vanquished to the gods. For the Maya, war was never mere politics. It was ritual, cosmology, and the theater of cosmic balance. The murals of Bonampak strike us with their intensity not only because of what they depict, but because of how rarely such imagery has survived. Most Maya art reached us through stone inscriptions or faint glyphic records. Here, instead, is a direct gaze into the living world. Pigments capturing sweat, fear, and blood as though the air of the 8th century was still present. For decades, scholars struggled to reconcile these walls with the older notion of the Maya as peaceful timekeepers, priestly astronomers whose gaze was fixed upon the heavens. Bonampak shattered that illusion. Here, power is reinforced through terror, dominance painted in crimson strokes. Yet, as disturbing as these scenes may seem to modern eyes, for the Maya, they were neither aberration nor cruelty for its own sake. They were enactments of divine necessity. War was a mechanism not only of politics, but of cosmic renewal. Captives were not merely enemies. They were vessels through which gods received sustenance. Archaeologists studying the pigments have found traces of Maya blue, a sacred color, resistant to time, created through a blend of indigo and clay. It clings stubbornly to the walls, as though holding on to the memory of sacrifice. One can almost imagine the incense smoke that once drifted here, mingling with the cries of prisoners and the chants of priests. And yet, another question arises. Why preserve such visions in such vivid, permanent form? These were not fleeting rituals for the eyes of a few. They were etched into the sacred temple walls as messages to the future. Perhaps they were declarations of power, a warning to subjects, a record of dominance, or perhaps, more subtly, they were instructions, reminders that violence was not arbitrary, but woven into the fabric of cosmic law. The site itself is modest compared to the grandeur of Tikal or Calakmul, yet within its painted walls, Bonampak contains a truth as monumental as any pyramid. For here, we see the Maya in full spectrum. Not only astronomers and builders, but warriors, rulers, and priests enmeshed in cycles of fear and reverence. Bonampak does not allow us to look away. It confronts us with the fragility of human life beneath the weight of divine expectation. It whispers that civilizations are not remembered solely by their monuments of stone, but also by the shadows of their rituals, preserved in color that defies time. And so the painted walls remain, still glowing in the dimness of their chamber, still carrying the weight of blood, music, and fire. A reminder that the Maya world, like all worlds, contained both splendor and terror, beauty and brutality. The murals end not with closure, but with silence. No inscription explains them fully. No glyph resolves the tension. Only the walls remain, painted with the echoes of blood and war, waiting for those who will gaze into them and wonder. Chapter 11, Quirigua, the giants of stone in the deep green basin of the Motagua River Valley, where ceiba trees rise like ancient sentinels, and the call of tropical birds echoes across the canopy. There lies a site whose grandeur does not come from sprawling plazas or vast pyramids, but from the silent verticality of stone. Quirigua. A city small in expanse, modest compared to its colossal neighbors, and yet home to some of the most astonishing monuments ever raised in the Maya world. Here, rising from the earth like giants petrified in ritual, stand stelae, stone monoliths carved with the voices of rulers, the dance of glyphs, and the weight of forgotten cycles of time. They are the tallest known in the Maya realm, some stretching nearly 11 meters into the air, hewn from sandstone, lifted upright with methods that remain partly veiled in mystery. To walk among them is to enter a forest within the forest, a gathering of immovable presences, each surface etched with stories of kings, gods, and the turning of cosmic wheels. Archaeologists speak of Quirigua as a satellite city, once under the shadow of Copan, yet in the late 8th century it rose abruptly to prominence. Through political maneuvering, war and alliance, its rulers dared to challenge those of greater power. And perhaps it is no coincidence that in this period, its stelae reached their most audacious heights. Monumentality here was more than commemoration. It was defiance, permanence, and perhaps an act of magical protection. The carving of words and images so deeply into stone that even centuries of rain and root could not erase them. The largest of these monuments, known as stelae, towers over the visitor like a cliff face of history. Its weight is estimated at over 60 tons, quarried and transported across the valley floor. How it was moved remains uncertain. The Maya possessed no beasts of burden, no wheels for transport, and yet somehow they raised this mass into place with precision. One theory suggests immense wooden rollers and human labor numbering in the thousands. Another imagines earthen ramps, the monument slowly inched upright by sheer determination. But still, when standing before its sheer bulk, one senses that something more was at play. A knowledge of stone, balance, and ritual force that we only faintly grasp. The glyphs carved upon these stelae are not casual inscriptions. They are dense with references to the long count calendar, to cycles of creation and destruction, to rulers presenting themselves as mediators between the human and divine. The faces of kings, stylized yet unmistakably human, emerge from the stone with a solemn intensity. Their garments are rendered in detail, feathers, jade, and woven patterns that suggest wealth, but also cosmic authority. Each glyph is a unit of language and image, a script that does not merely tell history, but anchors it into the material world. Why such scale? Why did Quirigua, a site of relatively limited power, pour its energy into creating monuments of such disproportionate immensity? Some suggest it was a political declaration, a way to outshine rivals not through military conquest, but through stone permanence. Others sense a deeper intention, that the monuments were designed as eternal witnesses, vessels of knowledge immune to fire, decay, or forgetfulness. In a civilization where codices could be burned, where wooden records vanished with rot, stone became the final refuge of memory. The stelae do not stand alone. Altars accompany them, carved with mythological motifs, crocodiles, serpents, cosmic monsters. These altars seem to bind the verticality of the stelae to the earth, anchoring the voices of kings within the underworld's domain. One altar shows bound captives, their fates sealed in stone. Another, circular and enigmatic, suggests the great cycle of time, endlessly repeating. The pairing of stela and altar forms a dialogue. Heaven and earth, sky and soil, ruler and sacrifice. Time, too, plays its role. The stelae mark great calendrical endings, katuns and baktuns, moments when cosmic cycles demanded recognition. At Quirigua, rulers cast themselves as keepers of these cycles, using the towering stones as both record and ritual tool. The monuments aligned with celestial events, their shadows marking equinox and solstice, turning stone into a silent calendar across centuries. But there is a lingering sense that the stones carry something more than dynastic pride. To gaze upon them today is to feel the strange impression that they were made not only for their own people, but for the distant future. The detail is excessive for monuments meant solely as propaganda. The height is unnecessary for mere ritual. These giants of stone seem instead to proclaim, "We were here, we knew, and we wish to be remembered." Erosion has softened their edges, yet the carvings remain legible. The sandstone holds its inscriptions with unusual resilience, as though chosen precisely for its permanence. Even now, the stelae stand tall amid the jungle, their bases wrapped in moss, their tops crowned by lichen, the canopy bending to accommodate their presence. In the silence, one imagines the ceremonies that once surrounded them. Incense smoke rising, flutes echoing, priests touching the stone with obsidian blades, drawing blood to awaken the memory embedded in its surface. For the visitor, Quirigua is not overwhelming in scale of city, but overwhelming in scale of symbol. The monuments dwarf the human body, not with the mass of pyramids, but with the vertical presence of story. To stand beside them is to feel oneself reduced, drawn into the currents of time they were meant to measure and preserve. We cannot know for certain whether the builders sought only to honor their rulers, or whether they sought to preserve truths about the cosmos, about cycles of destruction, about the binding of humanity to time itself. Perhaps both are true. For the Maya, there was no separation between the political and the cosmic, between kingship and the eternal order. And so Quirigua remains, a site small in territory, yet immense in message. Its stelae rise as if to challenge the centuries, as if to remind us that even in forgotten valleys, voices can be inscribed in stone so deeply that time itself must pause before erasing them. They stand not as ruins, but as presences, giants of stone, still speaking, still waiting for those who will listen. Chapter 12, Coba. The endless causeways in the dense jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula, where vines cling to ancient masonry and the cries of howler monkeys echo like distant thunder, lies a city that once pulsed with a rhythm unlike any other. Coba. Unlike the compact ceremonial centers familiar across the Maya world, Coba was a city defined by distance, by roads that stretched outward like veins, carrying life and meaning across the green immensity. Here, beneath the canopy, archaeologists have uncovered a network of causeways, sakbiob, the white roads of Maya tradition, constructed of limestone, raised above the jungle floor, and coated in a plaster that gleamed in moonlight and sun alike. They form one of the largest and most enigmatic road systems of the pre-Columbian Americas. Some extend only a few hundred meters, linking plazas and pyramids within the heart of the city. Others reach into the horizon, cutting straight through the jungle for dozens of miles, connecting Coba to distant settlements, lakes, and ceremonial centers. The longest of these, Sakba 1, stretches for nearly 60 miles, linking Coba to the site of Yaxuna. To walk even a fraction of it today, reclaimed by trees and soil, is to glimpse the audacity of its builders. These were not simple footpaths worn by travel. They were engineered with precision, raised above wetlands, straightened to unnatural degree, designed to endure. The word Sakba itself carries layers of meaning, not only white road, but also a pathway of light, a route both physical and symbolic, where earthly travel touched cosmic intention. Standing at the base of Nohochmu, the Great Pyramid of Coba, the tallest in the northern Yucatan, one can still imagine processions moving outward along these causeways, priests bearing torches, merchants carrying obsidian blades and cacao, emissaries traveling between kingdoms. Yet the scale suggests more than commerce. To build a road 60 miles in length, cutting through dense forest, required coordination, resources, and vision that transcended mere convenience. Some scholars see in the Sakbiob a map of power. They joined Coba not only to its neighbors, but to its rivals. Through them, Coba projected influence far beyond its plazas, binding satellite communities into its orbit. The roads were arteries of empire, flowing outward from the city's core. Yet others see something more elusive. alignments that correspond to celestial patterns, orientations that echo solstice and equinox, perhaps embedding the heavens into the very geography of the Earth. At night, under the vast stars of the Yucatan sky, one can imagine the Nakbé as luminous paths, glowing pale in the moonlight, their whiteness guiding travelers in the darkness. In Maya cosmology, the Milky Way itself was seen as a great celestial road, a Nakbé across the heavens, carrying the souls of the dead toward Xibalba, the underworld. To construct gleaming roads upon the Earth may have been to mirror this cosmic highway, making Koba not just a city, but a reflection of the universe itself. Each causeway begins and ends at significant architectural groups, temple clusters, plazas, reservoirs, or stelae carved with the faces of rulers. Movement along them was likely not casual, but ceremonial, each journey an enactment of myth. Pilgrims walking their length may have been reenacting the soul's passage through cosmic space, stepping between realms as they crossed the jungle. In this light, commerce and ritual need not be opposed, for in the Maya world, the exchange of goods, ideas, and sacred essence often flowed together as one. The construction of these causeways reveals a society both pragmatic and visionary. To cross wetlands, builders laid down stone fill, raising the road above water. In some areas, retaining walls were built to prevent erosion. The surfaces were plastered smooth, reflecting light and resisting the elements. Even now, fragments of plaster glimmer faintly beneath leaves, reminders that these roads once shone like rivers of stone. Their straightness is striking, as if the builders refused to yield to the terrain, carving a direct line of intention through the wilderness. Yet the jungle reclaims. Today, many Nakbé lie hidden, detectable only from above, their outlines revealed by LiDAR scans that strip away vegetation to expose the ancient geometry beneath. What emerges is astonishing. Koba was not a scattered cluster of ruins, but a city bound by a vast web of connections. Its roads fan outward in multiple directions, suggesting a vision of unity across distance, a desire to collapse the vastness of jungle into a coherent map of sacred order. In this way, the Nakbé challenge earlier assumptions about the Maya as isolated city-states. They suggest instead a civilization of networks, of shared pathways, of deliberate connection. Koba may have been less a capital than a node in a greater pattern, one whose significance we are only beginning to grasp. There is also a sensory dimension to consider. Imagine walking such a road centuries ago, the jungle thick on either side, yet underfoot a smooth white surface, gleaming in the sun, radiating heat by day and glowing softly by night. The road itself would have felt otherworldly, distinct from the chaos of the forest. It would have guided the traveler not just physically, but psychologically, into a space of heightened awareness. Every step along the Nakbé was a step into the order of cosmos, into the domain of kings and gods. And yet, questions remain. Why extend a road so far when paths of earth might have sufficed for trade? Why demand such perfection of line, such costly plastering, if not to invoke something beyond utility? Were the roads themselves offerings, written upon the landscape as acts of devotion? Or were they texts, inscribed in stone, legible to those who understood the geometry of earth and sky? The Maya word for road, bi, also carries connotations of journey, destiny, and fate. In this sense, the Nakbé was not only a route, but a life path, a destiny inscribed. To traverse it was to participate in a larger order, one in which human steps aligned with cosmic rhythm. Koba's roads thus remain as enigmatic as they are impressive. They bind the city to its surroundings, but also to the heavens. They suggest power, but also pilgrimage. They reveal a Maya world that was both practical and profoundly symbolic, where the act of moving through space was inseparable from the act of moving through time. Today, standing amid the silence, one feels the pull of those straight lines, disappearing into the forest, pointing always towards something unseen. They are fragments of a vision that has outlasted its makers, stone threads still woven into the fabric of the earth. Perhaps they were roads of commerce, perhaps they were roads of ritual, or perhaps, as with so many works of the ancient world, they were both. Arteries of a civilization that refused to divide the sacred from the practical, the earthly from the cosmic. At Koba, the roads do not end in answers. They stretch endlessly onward, fading into jungle, into silence, into mystery. Chapter 13, Jibel Chaltun, the Temple of the Seven Dolls in the northern Yucatan, where the limestone bedrock lies close to the surface, and the air hangs heavy with heat. The ruins of Zibil-Chaltun rise quietly among thorny scrub and dry forest. Unlike the dense jungles of Koba or Tikal, this is a landscape of sun and stone, of brittle grasses, and the endless shimmer of light. Here, in a city that once stretched across thousands of structures, stands a small but hauntingly precise monument, the Temple of the Seven Dolls. It is not the largest of temples, nor is it adorned with monumental sculptures or towering pyramids. Yet, within its geometry lies a secret written in light. Twice each year, on the mornings of the spring and autumn equinox, the sun rises in such a way that its rays pierce directly through the temple's doorway. The effect is breathtaking, the orb of the sun framed perfectly, as if drawn into alignment by unseen hands, then passing through, illuminating the darkened chamber within before emerging on the other side. For the Maya, this was no accident. The equinox marked a threshold in the year, a moment when day and night stood in fragile balance. To witness the sun's passage through the doorway was to see the turning of the cosmic cycle inscribed upon the earth itself. It was a union of ritual and science, of careful observation and sacred meaning. The temple became more than stone. It became a calendar in architecture, a reminder that human time must remain in step with the rhythms of the heavens. The structure itself is modest, a square building with narrow windows, positioned atop a platform that slightly elevates it above the surrounding plain. Yet every angle, every opening, every line of sight was crafted to serve a larger design. Even the narrow windows seem to echo the language of light, framing celestial events beyond the equinox alone. To stand inside its walls during dawn is to feel the building awaken, as shadows move across the plaster and beams of gold strike with deliberate force. And yet, the temple's name comes not from the sun, but from what was discovered buried within. When archaeologists excavated the site in the mid-20th century, they found 7 small effigies hidden in its fill. They were crudely shaped figures, fashioned of clay, with abstract features that resist easy interpretation. Some call them dolls, though their true purpose remains uncertain. Were they offerings left to consecrate the temple's foundation? Were they tokens of devotion, placed by those who sought to align themselves with the cosmic balance of equinox light? Or were they fragments of a lost myth, characters in a story no longer remembered, bound to cycles of renewal and descent? The number itself, 7, invites speculation. In many traditions, 7 marks a sacred completeness. The 7 days of creation, the 7 wandering stars visible to the naked eye, the 7 layers of heavens and underworlds imagined across cultures. Could these 7 small figures have stood as guardians of the cosmos, embodiments of celestial forces placed within the temple's heart? Or were they reminders of ancestors, the human presence beneath the celestial display? We cannot know for certain. The figures themselves offer few clues. They are neither finely made nor richly adorned, suggesting not wealth, but something more symbolic. Their anonymity may be their meaning. Faceless witnesses to a drama enacted each year as the sun passed through the temple, binding human ritual to cosmic order. Zibil-Chaltun itself was no minor outpost. Its history stretches back nearly 3,000 years, making it one of the longest occupied sites in the Maya world. Its name means the place where there is writing on the stones, a reflection of its stelae and monuments. Around it spread plazas, dwellings, temples, and the sacred cenotes lacquer, where offerings of pottery, jade, and human remains reveal centuries of devotion. To live here was to dwell on sacred ground, where stone, water, and sky converged. The Temple of the 7 Dolls, though small, occupies a commanding place within this landscape. From its platform, the horizon opens wide, the low vegetation unable to conceal the vastness of the sky. It is a temple of the sun, a place where earth bows to light. One can imagine processions climbing its steps in the cool hours before dawn, waiting in stillness for the moment of alignment. As the first fire of the equinox sun pierced the doorway, drums may have sounded, conch shells blown, voices raised in prayer. The people gathered not simply to mark time, but to participate in it, to help turn the wheel of the year, ensuring the cycles of rain, maize, and life would continue. In the broader world of Maya cosmology, the equinox carried layered significance. It was not merely balance, but transition, a threshold where the sun shifted its journey, marking the descent into planting season or the preparation for harvest. Time was not linear, but cyclical, a great turning in which human survival depended upon harmony with celestial rhythm. The Temple of the Seven Dolls embodied this truth, a reminder etched into architecture that the sky was the ultimate measure, and the gods of sun and maize must be honored in their precise seasons. The dolls themselves were found not carefully placed within niches, but buried within the rubble that filled the temple at a later time. This suggests that they may have been remnants from an earlier structure, preserved and reinterred when the temple was rebuilt. They may carry within them echoes of a memory older than the temple itself, relics of a myth whose details were already ancient by the time this building rose. If so, then the Temple of the Seven Dolls is not only an observatory, but a palimpsest of memory, a layering of cycles within cycles. The equinox sun shines through its doorway, as it has for centuries, yet within its core lie fragments of human hands and stories, now reduced to silent clay. When the sun strikes, the effect lasts only moments. A brief passage, a fleeting alignment, gone almost as quickly as it appears. Yet it is enough. For those who stood here, it was proof that the universe remained in order, that life could continue. The temple gave permanence to that fragile instant, fixing it into stone so that generation after generation could witness the same golden shaft of light, the same union of earth and sky. Even today, crowds gather on the equinox, modern pilgrims seeking the same experience. They watch as the dawn breaks, as the sun rises precisely in line, as it has done for centuries. For a moment, the boundary between past and present dissolves, and all stand within the same light. The dolls may never reveal their secret, but the temple still speaks. In silence, in shadow, in the slow turning of the earth. Here at Zibil Chaltun, we find the fusion of the practical and the sacred, of science and story. A small temple, yet infinite in its precision. 7 nameless figures, yet endless in their mystery. A rising sun, eternal, yet fleeting in its passage. All converge in this place, where balance is not a concept, but a living moment, renewed each spring and autumn, for as long as the stone endures. And when the sun has moved on, when the chamber lies once again in shadow, the temple waits. It waits for the next cycle, the next equinox, the next generation to bear witness. It waits, as it always has, as it always will, a silent witness to the endless rhythm of light. Chapter 14. Monte Alban echoes beyond the Maya High upon a leveled mountaintop in the valley of Oaxaca. There lies a city that seems to hover between worlds. Monte Alban, carved from the very bones of the mountain itself, is one of the oldest and most enigmatic ceremonial centers in Mesoamerica. From its windswept plazas, the horizon opens in all directions, granting the sense not of a city confined by stone, but of a sacred observatory suspended between earth and sky. Here, long before the flourishing of Maya civilization, the Zapotec people built an enduring monument to power, ritual, and cosmic order. Monte Alban was not a Maya city, and yet, its stones whisper of connections that traveled far beyond the mountains of Oaxaca. Traders, emissaries, and pilgrims would have walked its steep stairways, carrying obsidian, jade, and cacao. But along with goods came something less tangible: the transmission of ideas, calendars, systems of writing, and shared understandings of sacrifice and renewal, all moved along these invisible pathways, weaving together a Mesoamerican world bound by common symbols and cosmic memory. The great plaza of Monte Alban, stretching across the flattened peak, served not only as a civic space, but also as a stage upon which celestial alignments were enacted. Buildings stand at deliberate angles, their orientations bound to the movements of sun, moon, and stars. Archaeologists have long noted the peculiar positioning of Structure J, a building with an arrow-shaped base, tilted against the regular grid of the plaza. Its alignment points not to earthly features, but to the rising of specific stars, perhaps Sirius, perhaps Capella, suggesting that the city's very foundations were conceived as a mirror of the heavens. It is here that one begins to see how Monte Alban may have acted as a bridge. The Zapotec glyphs inscribed upon stelae bear a resemblance to those of the Maya, not in direct imitation, but in shared lineage. They suggest an older, wider tradition of recording sacred time, one that predates the Mayan script yet resonates with it. The numbering of days, the reverence for the 260-day ritual calendar, and the tracking of celestial cycles appear again and again, as if each culture drew from a reservoir of knowledge, older than any single city. Among the most striking features of Monte Alban are the so-called danzantes, carved stone, Figures that line the site's earliest temples, their contorted forms, limbs twisted, faces marked with strange expressions, are unlike anything else in Mesoamerica. Early archaeologists imagined them as dancers, but closer study suggests something more somber. They may represent captives, sacrificed rulers, or mythic beings whose bodies recorded ritual transformation. The Maya, too, would later carve captives into their monuments, offering them as symbols of cosmic victory. Was this an inheritance of form, a motif passed along through trade and memory, or the resurfacing of a much older archetype, drawn from humanity's deep symbolic past? The city flourished between 500 BCE and 700 CE, a time that overlaps with the rise of great Maya centers, such as Tikal and Calakmul. Evidence of direct contact has been uncovered. Zapotec tombs filled with turquoise mosaics and objects of Maya origin, glyphic inscriptions that echo across both traditions, and pottery whose designs suggest shared aesthetic worlds. The exchange was not one of domination, but of weaving. Threads of culture and cosmology carried along the highland valleys, binding distant peoples together. To stand at Monte Alban is to feel the weight of its silence. Unlike the Maya lowland cities swallowed by the jungle, Monte Alban sits upon a bare ridge, its stones exposed to the wind and the open sky. One can imagine delegations from distant lands arriving here, gazing upon the valley below, and recognizing in its architecture a reflection of their own sacred order. Sacrifice, calendar, astronomy. These were not isolated inventions, but shared languages across a wide cultural sphere. The question lingers: what deeper current united them all? Were the Zapotec, the Maya, and their neighbors heirs to an even older system of knowledge, fragments of which we glimpse in their temples and glyphs? Some scholars see in Monte Alban the outline of a pan-Mesoamerican cosmology, one that treated the city itself as a sacred mountain, its flattened summit as a man-made horizon where earth and sky converged. In this view, Monte Alban becomes more than a regional power. It becomes a node in a vast network of memory, a place where traditions older than the Maya were preserved and transmitted. In Tomb 104, archaeologists uncovered walls painted with symbols of jaguars, serpents, and celestial beings. These images echo with the same mythic vocabulary seen later in Maya codices and murals. The jaguar, guardian of the underworld; the serpent, bridge between worlds; the celestial figures, markers of time and destiny. Across centuries and miles, these images persist, their meanings shifting but never fully lost. It is as if Monte Alban and the Maya both dipped their hands into the same well of myth. When the Maya carved their elaborate hieroglyphs, recording dynasties, eclipses, and cosmic reckonings, they may have been continuing a tradition that Monte Alban had already set in stone. The Zapotec glyphs remain only partially deciphered, but their echoes are clear enough to suggest a continuity of thought. Knowledge of the calendar, of cycles both earthly and cosmic, passed silently from one people to another, carried not by armies but by traders, pilgrims, and ritual specialists. Today, as one walks the silent plaza of Monte Alban, the stones hold an austere dignity. The staircases rise steeply, leading to temples where the sky seems impossibly close. To the west, the sun sets over the Sierra Madre, casting long shadows across the carved figures of the danzantes. To the east, the valley stretches endlessly, a reminder of the lifeways once bound together by roads, rivers, and rituals. The Maya world was vast, but it was never isolated. Monte Alban reminds us that civilizations do not rise in solitude. They are part of a living web of exchange, influence, and shared remembrance. The Zapotec city, perched high upon its sacred ridge, may have been one of the great bridges in that web, carrying forward fragments of ancient knowledge that would later find fuller expression in Maya cosmology. And yet, questions remain. How much of what we call Maya science was already gestating here? Were the orientations of Monte Alban's temples a prototype for later observatories like Uxmal and Chichen Itzá? Did the stories encoded in Zapotec glyphs carry forward into Maya prophecy? Or do both traditions point back still further, to a forgotten source whose memory has long since been buried beneath layers of stone? The answers lie not in certainty but in resonance. Monte Alban does not speak in conclusions. It speaks in echoes, in alignments, in carved figures whose meanings slip just beyond reach. It is in these echoes that we sense a continuity that transcends borders, a whisper from a time when sacred knowledge flowed freely across mountains, rivers, and jungles. As twilight descends over the valley of Oaxaca, the stones of Monte Alban darken, their surfaces cooling in the evening air. The city becomes a silhouette against the fading sky, an enduring monument to memory and mystery. Here, beyond the Maya, yet inseparably tied to them, the echoes continue, quiet, persistent, and unresolved. Chapter 15. Maya. Writing. The glyphs that spoke to the gods in the shadowed halls of time, carved deeply into stone and painted upon bark, the Maya left a legacy that continues to confound and mesmerize. Their writing, intricate and rhythmic, was not merely a method of recording words, it was a bridge between the human and the divine. Each glyph, carefully composed of lines, curves, and dots, held layers of meaning. A name, a date, a ritual, a prayer, a prophecy. Unlike the linear scripts of other ancient civilizations, Maya writing intertwined phonetic signs with logograms, creating a language that could speak at once to the practical, the ceremonial, and the cosmic. It was, in many ways, a living conduit to the gods. The codices, delicate books made of bark paper coated with lime, were painted with meticulous care. Only a handful survive today: Dresden, Madrid, Paris, and Grolier. But even these fragments offer glimpses into a civilization that saw time as a circle, cycles as sacred, and the heavens as a mirror of the earthly order. Ritual calendars, astronomical tables, and divinatory sequences leap from their pages, suggesting knowledge of Venus, eclipses, and planetary movements that rivaled contemporary European astronomy centuries later. The codices were more than records. They were tools of power, teaching the priests and rulers how to align human action with celestial order. Yet, much of this knowledge was nearly obliterated. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they saw these books not as treasures, but as heretical instruments of a false religion. Friars burned the codices by the thousands, erasing generations of accumulated wisdom in a single act of cultural violence. Some suggest that what was destroyed contained secrets not only of ritual and politics, but of technology, agriculture, and medicine, wisdom passed through centuries of observation and experimentation. What survived is tantalizing and incomplete, fragments scattered across distant libraries, tantalizing scholars and stirring speculation about what has been lost forever. Beyond the codices, Maya writing adorned every conceivable surface. Temple walls, palace stairways, altars, and stelae were etched with glyphs that recorded the names of rulers, the dates of battles, the births and deaths of nobles, and the cycles of the cosmos. In these inscriptions, the Maya created a narrative of power and time intertwined. Kings were immortalized not just in stone, but in the very memory of the universe, their deeds encoded alongside celestial events, ensuring that their reigns would echo across eternity. The structure of the script itself reflects a deep understanding of language and cognition. A single glyph could combine a phonetic sound with a symbolic image, enabling messages to be layered with meaning. For instance, a glyph representing a maize god might also indicate fertility, time, or lineage, allowing priests to inscribe teachings that operated simultaneously on multiple levels. It was a system that demanded attention, study, and reverence, one that turned writing into an act of devotion. Some of the most intricate examples appear on the monumental stelae of cities such as Copan, Quirigua, and Palenque. Here, entire dynasties are chronicled with a precision that mirrors astronomical calculations. The inscriptions record exact dates of accession, conquests, and rituals, often aligned with celestial events. Yet, in these precise accounts, there is also space for myth. Gods walk alongside kings. Creation cycles overlap with historic events. The earthly and the divine are inseparable. This duality, historical record and sacred narrative, is central to understanding the power of Maya writing. The destruction of this system during the conquest was not merely cultural, it was epistemic. By eliminating the codices and suppressing literacy among the population, the Spanish interrupted a chain of knowledge that stretched back centuries. Priests, astronomers, and scribes who had studied the cycles of time, the intricacies of human behavior, and the patterns of the natural world were silenced. Oral tradition survived, but the visual precision, the astronomical correlations, and the ritual codifications were largely lost. Modern scholars rely on fragments, cross-referencing inscriptions from temples and monuments to reconstruct what was once a vast and interconnected library of knowledge. Even in its incomplete state, Maya writing continues to reveal astonishing complexity. The Dresden Codex alone contains tables charting Venus with extraordinary accuracy, enabling the timing of ceremonies to align with the planet's heliacal rising. Other codices document lunar cycles, eclipses, and the interplay of the sun with the stars. Such sophistication suggests that the scribes of the Maya were not merely recording history. They were engaging in applied cosmology, using their script as a lens to navigate the rhythms of the universe. The act of writing was inseparable from power. Not everyone could read or write. Literacy was the province of priests and elite scribes, whose authority derived from their ability to interpret the glyphs. To possess knowledge of the sacred calendar, to calculate the timing of sacrifices, or the accession of a king, was to wield control over both human and divine order. The inscriptions themselves became instruments of legitimacy, embedding dynasties within the fabric of cosmic time, and giving rulers a voice that transcended mortality. Yet, beneath the authority and ritual precision lies a subtle enigma. Some glyphs seem to preserve older forms, traces of forgotten cosmologies or pre-Maya influences. The way certain signs combine phonetic and symbolic elements suggests that the script may encode layers of memory reaching back into a distant past. These are whispers of knowledge, fragments of a time when the Maya drew upon traditions that had circulated across Mesoamerica for centuries, perhaps even millennia. In this sense, the writing is not merely historical, it is a vessel of continuity, connecting the living to the ancestral, the visible to the invisible. Inscriptions on monuments are often placed deliberately in alignment with architectural and astronomical features. In Palenque, for instance, temple inscriptions coincide with solstitial alignments, linking the king's narrative to the sun's path across the sky. At Copan, stairways such as the hieroglyphic stairway encode the dynastic lineage alongside ritual events, creating a temporal map of power. The interplay of text and space transforms writing into an immersive, living experience, a dialogue between the human, the sacred, and the cosmos. The surviving glyphs also hint at the Maya's understanding of cycles, not only of time, but of human experience. Repetition of motifs and phrases underscores the importance of continuity, of learning from past generations, and of harmonizing human action with universal order. It is this cyclical view that underpins much of Maya cosmology. Kingship, agriculture, and ritual were not discrete events, but threads woven into the ongoing pattern of creation and destruction. The glyphs are at once records and instruments, documenting the past while guiding the present and future. As we examine the surviving codices and inscriptions, we are confronted with both wonder and loss. The knowledge encoded in these glyphs is astonishingly precise, yet tantalizingly incomplete. Scholars have reconstructed much, but each discovery only deepens the mystery. How much was erased when the friars burned the codices? What insights into agriculture, astronomy, medicine, or technology were lost forever? The Maya script, in its elegance and sophistication, stands as both testament and challenge, a record of human genius, and a reminder of what can vanish when memory is violently interrupted. Even today, the act of deciphering Maya glyphs carries a sense of reverence. Each successful translation opens a window into a world of ritual, cosmology, and political life, illuminating the intimate relationship between human action and cosmic design. Through these inscriptions, the Maya continue to speak across centuries, reminding us that civilization is not merely built from stone, but from knowledge, memory, and the careful recording of time. And yet, the silence imposed by conquest persists. The gaps in the record, the fragments scattered across museums, the glyphs whose meanings remain partially understood, all these create a shadow over our comprehension. We are left to wonder what insights were deliberately concealed, what layers of understanding are lost, and how much of the Maya worldview we can ever truly recover. In the echoes of these glyphs, the past speaks both clearly and cryptically, inviting us to listen carefully, to trace the lines and curves, and to contemplate the knowledge that once linked the Maya to the heavens, to their gods, and to each other. Chapter 16. The Long Count. Cycles of time and catastrophe in the dense jungles and sun-baked plains of Mesoamerica, the Maya conceived a system of time unlike any the ancient world had known. It was a vision of continuity and recurrence, a calendar not limited to the fleeting years of a human life, but extending across millennia. This was the long count, a method of reckoning that could mark the turning of eras, the passage of dynasties, and perhaps even the echoes of events that predated memory itself. Unlike the ritual cycles of 20 or 13 days found in the Tzolk'in, the long count reached far into the past, offering a scaffold on which generations of scribes, astronomers, and priests could inscribe the story of time itself. At its core, the long count is mathematical elegance realized. It is composed of baktuns, katuns, tuns, unals, and kins, units of time that interlock in a complex, layered structure. One baktun equals 144,000 days, one katun equals 7,200 days, one tun equals 360 days, one wenal 20 days, and one kin a single day. These units were not arbitrary. They reflect a profound understanding of cycles, of the movement of celestial bodies, and of the rhythms that govern life on Earth. The long count allowed the Maya to date events across vast temporal spans, to situate kings and their deeds within a cosmic framework that dwarfed human lifespans. Yet, this was more than mathematics. The long count was also a language of memory, encoding history, mythology, and perhaps even warnings. Inscriptions on stelae and temple walls record dates that reach back thousands of years, often marking the beginning of a cycle or the culmination of an era. Some of these inscriptions hint at catastrophic events, periods when the heavens and the earth were thought to converge in disruption. Floods, famines, and celestial anomalies are suggested within the language of the long count, though veiled in mythic symbolism. Here, time itself becomes a witness to cycles of creation and destruction, a record that spans beyond the visible lifespan of human generations. Astronomical correlations embedded within the long count suggest an extraordinary sophistication. Certain baktuns align with the apparent movements of Venus, the solar cycle, and eclipse intervals. Scholars have noted that Maya astronomers observed the heavens with precision, tracking planets, lunar phases, and solstitial shifts in ways that harmonized with these vast temporal units. The calendar was not merely symbolic, it was operational, allowing priests to forecast celestial events and align rituals with cosmic rhythms. In this, the long count reveals a civilization in which the human and celestial orders were inseparable, where kingship, sacrifice, and ceremony were synchronized with the movements of distant worlds. The long count's conception of cyclical destruction is perhaps its most enigmatic aspect. Texts hint at past eras marked by upheaval, periods when the order of the cosmos and the structure of society were violently disrupted. Some scholars interpret these as allegorical, a philosophical reflection on the impermanence of power and life. Others, however, suggest that they may preserve memories of real events, catastrophic floods, solar anomalies, or regional collapses that the Maya recorded as cycles of destruction and renewal. The possibility that these inscriptions encode pre-flood events is tantalizing, for they imply that the Maya were drawing upon a far older memory, a collective awareness of cycles that stretch beyond the horizon of conventional history. The completion of a baktun, a full cycle of 144,000 days, was not a casual mark in the sand. It was a profound moment, imbued with ritual and symbolic resonance. Cities like Tikal, Palenque, and Copan erected monuments to commemorate these transitions, aligning temples and plazas with the rising sun or with sacred celestial markers. Kings would perform ceremonies that enacted the cycle itself, reminding their people that human life was fleeting, but time, in its grand recursive structure, endured. These observances also reinforced the continuity of dynasties and legitimized rulership, framing political authority within the immutable order of cosmic time. Yet the long count also presents an unsettling question. Were these cycles merely conceptual, or were they informed by empirical memory of past catastrophes? Consider the precision with which certain events are recorded, the careful alignment with astronomical phenomena, and the repeated warnings embedded in inscriptions. Some glyphs suggest calamities that reset social and natural orders, hinting at floods, fire, or other disturbances that may have occurred long before the classic Maya period. Could it be that the long count preserved not just ceremonial or philosophical notions of time, but encoded knowledge of real-world cycles of destruction, preserved across generations as a form of sacred memory? The intersections of myth and history become particularly striking when we examine inscriptions on stelae. Kings are often depicted alongside gods or cosmic symbols, situating their reigns within cycles of creation and dissolution. Dates are not merely record-keeping, they are statements about continuity, warning, and the inevitability of change. A king's accession is mirrored by celestial events. A ritual is aligned with the movement of planets. These alignments suggest that the Maya understood power as a temporal and cosmic phenomenon, dependent not solely on human action, but on the rhythm of the universe itself. Moreover, the long count reveals a conception of time that challenges modern linear sensibilities. Whereas we perceive history as a straight line, the Maya envisioned it as a series of interlocking cycles, each with its own beginning and end, each reflecting patterns of growth, climax, and decay. Human lifespans, dynasties, and civilizations were but fleeting actors on a stage of cosmic repetition. In this worldview, memory and observation become sacred. The recording of events is an act of alignment, ensuring that human societies remain in resonance with the broader order of time. Yet, in its elegance, the long count remains incomplete to us. Many cycles are partially understood, inscriptions eroded, glyphs ambiguous, and interpretations disputed. The calendar does not offer linear predictions or explicit explanations. It speaks in patterns, in cycles, in echoes. Its warnings are veiled in myth, its knowledge encoded in the language of the cosmos, leaving modern scholars to reconstruct what the Maya themselves may have seen with clarity. What we uncover are fragments, traces of observation, mathematics, and memory, hints of a civilization that measured time with a precision that continues to astound. There is a haunting resonance in the long count's treatment of cataclysm. Just as it tracks creation, so too does it track dissolution. Inscriptions often link these cycles with water, fire, and celestial phenomena. Could these represent memory of climatic upheavals, meteoric events, or societal collapses long lost to ordinary history? The possibility suggests that the Maya were, in effect, archivists of catastrophe, embedding in their calendar a knowledge of cycles so vast that they spanned generations, continents, and perhaps even epochs. In this sense, the long count becomes not only a tool for measuring time, but a vessel of warning, a codified awareness of the fragility of human civilization when placed within the immense theatre of cosmic and terrestrial forces. As we trace the Baktuns and Katuns, we glimpse a civilization acutely aware of the impermanence of all things. Time is not simply a neutral measure, it is a force that governs kings and peasants alike, guiding ritual, shaping agriculture, and dictating survival. The long count, in all its complexity, embodies a worldview in which human experience is inseparable from cosmic cycles, where knowledge, memory, and observation converge to create a record of both triumph and catastrophe. In contemplating the long count, one is struck by the duality of human endeavor, the aspiration to measure, to record, and to align with forces far greater than oneself, and the sobering recognition that cycles of destruction are inevitable, perhaps encoded in the very fabric of existence. The calendar speaks both of achievement and of warning, of the grandeur of Maya observation and the fragility of civilization under the sweep of cosmic time. It is this interplay between precision and mystery, between memory and obliteration, that continues to fascinate modern observers. Scholars deciphering the glyphs and dates confront a civilization that measured millennia as easily as days, that embedded warnings of catastrophe within the rhythm of the cosmos. And that left us with an enduring question. How much of our understanding of time, history, and human endurance can be gleaned from these cycles? And what might still remain encoded in patterns we have yet to fully decipher, waiting for generations of seekers to unlock the echoes of the past? The long count remains, in essence, both a testament and a riddle. It charts time with sublime accuracy, traces the rise and fall of kings and dynasties, and hints at catastrophes that may predate recorded memory. Yet it leaves space for mystery, for interpretation, for wonder. In every Baktun and Katun, we encounter the Maya vision of a universe in cycles, a cosmos that is both ordered and indifferent, and a civilization whose understanding of time continues to challenge and inspire. As we step back from these inscriptions and observe the rhythm they reveal, we are reminded that human history is but a moment within the vast dance of time, and that memory, written in stone and glyph, is our most enduring bridge to the past. Chapter 17, Astronomy. The Sky Watchers of the Jungle. amid the dense foliage of the Yucatan and the highlands of Chiapas. The Maya constructed their cities not only to honor kings and gods, but also to honor the sky itself. Their temples, pyramids, and plazas were laid out with precision, each orientation carefully chosen to correspond with celestial movements. Nowhere is this more evident than at El Caracol, the famed observatory of Chichen Itzá. Here, the structure rises above the surrounding cityscape. A circular tower perched atop a rectangular base, its windows and doorways deliberately aligned to track the passage of Venus, the solstices, and eclipses. Every stone seems to whisper an understanding of the heavens, as if the very architecture itself were a lens through which the Maya could read the cosmos. The study of the sky was not casual or ornamental. It was integral to Maya life, informing agriculture, ritual, and power. Venus, in particular, was meticulously observed. Its cycles dictated the timing of war, sacrifice, and ceremonial events. Codices such as the Dresden Codex record precise calculations of Venus's heliacal rising and setting, demonstrating an astonishing comprehension of orbital mechanics. These calculations are not simple observations. They are predictive models, a way to anticipate the heavens' movements with an accuracy that would not be matched in Europe for centuries. The Maya were able to forecast eclipses, lunar phases, and the subtle shifts of planets, embedding these cycles within their ritual calendar and their long count chronology. Yet the purpose of this observation may extend beyond pragmatism. While we often imagine such knowledge serving agriculture or political ritual, there are hints that the Maya saw the sky as a record, a ledger of cosmic memory. Eclipses, comets, and other celestial events are frequently associated in inscriptions with periods of upheaval or transition. Some glyphs seem to link these phenomena to cataclysmic floods, dynastic collapse, or the death of rulers. The heavens were not only a clock or calendar, they were a mirror of terrestrial fate, reflecting cycles of destruction and renewal. In watching the stars, the Maya may have been attempting to safeguard knowledge of patterns that stretch beyond human lifetimes, encoding warnings within the movements of distant worlds. El Caracol itself reveals the ingenuity of Maya astronomical design. From its circular tower, windows frame the horizon at specific points where the sun rises on the solstices. Certain doorways correspond with Venus's extreme positions, marking the first and last appearances of the morning star. The alignment of these windows is not approximate. It reflects careful observation over decades, perhaps centuries. The structure allows a priest or astronomer to track these events with subtle shifts of light and shadow, creating a living instrument for measuring time, ritual, and perhaps the recurrence of events the Maya had learned to anticipate. Beyond El Caracol, similar observatories exist throughout the Maya world, from Uxmal to Copan. Each reflects the same deep preoccupation with celestial cycles, yet each is unique, adapted to local geography, horizon lines and urban layout. Pyramids and temples often functioned as gnomons, casting shadows that marked the solstices or equinoxes. Staircases and terraces were oriented to catch sunlight or starlight at specific angles, a silent testimony to generations of careful observation. These alignments suggest a worldview in which the movement of stars and planets is inseparable from human activity, where kingship, agriculture, and ritual are orchestrated in harmony with the heavens. The role of Venus in Maya culture is particularly compelling. Its brightness and cyclic disappearance and reappearance earned it the attention of priests and scribes alike. The morning star heralded warfare. The evening star marked periods of peace. Its appearances were meticulously recorded, often alongside ritual events. The Dresden Codex alone contains hundreds of entries mapping its cycles, revealing an understanding that is not merely observational, but predictive. The Maya could anticipate when Venus would rise in the east or set in the west, and they integrated these observations into both civil and sacred life. In this way, celestial observation became inseparable from the rhythms of society. Eclipses, too, occupied a central place in Maya cosmology. Unlike modern observers who might regard them as curiosities, the Maya interpreted them as portentous events. Their codices and inscriptions indicate that lunar and solar eclipses were carefully predicted and observed, often accompanied by ceremonies intended to maintain cosmic balance. The precision required to forecast these events suggests not only patient observation, but a mathematical understanding that rivals early modern European astronomy. These were not casual skywatchers, they were chroniclers of celestial cycles, capable of recording patterns spanning decades and even centuries. But what lies behind this extraordinary observation? Was it purely utilitarian, a tool to time planting seasons and ritual calendars, or did it preserve a deeper awareness? Some scholars propose that the Maya were recording patterns that extended into prehistory, cosmic cycles that repeat over vast epochs, perhaps marking floods, droughts, or meteorological shifts. In this light, the temples and observatories become repositories of forbidden memory, a bridge between human experience and the celestial record of Earth's ancient catastrophes. The sky, with its cycles of light and shadow, could have been both a guide and a warning, a means of embedding survival knowledge across generations. There is also the matter of architecture as astronomical text. At El Caracol and in many other sites, the building itself functions as a mnemonic device. The placement of windows, stairs, and doorways encodes celestial information. A priest standing within the tower would observe the first light of Venus at precise angles, read its significance, and transmit that knowledge through ritual and inscription. The stones are not mere markers. They are instruments, calculators, and repositories, capable of conveying knowledge across centuries even if the culture around them were to falter. Furthermore, the Maya approach to the sky was holistic. Observations were not made in isolation. They were woven into ritual, architecture, and urban planning. Plazas, pyramids, and causeways were aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and planetary cycles. Water features mirrored the stars. Reflecting pools captured the movements of the heavens at dawn and dusk. In this way, the Maya created an immersive cosmology, a built environment in which human activity and celestial movement were inseparable. The city itself became a cosmic instrument, each structure a note in the music of the spheres. And yet, despite this sophistication, so much remains uncertain. Inscriptions allude to celestial phenomena that we can only speculate about. Certain alignments may reference comets, meteor showers, or obscure planetary configurations. Others may encode warnings, ritual instructions, or historical memory long lost to time. We can observe, measure, and calculate, but the Maya encoded layers of meaning that remain partially veiled. The sky watchers of the jungle left us tools to understand patterns, but they also left us questions, enigmas deliberately folded into stone and shadow. In contemplating the Maya sky watchers, one senses both precision and awe. They observed with patience, measured in decades, recorded with meticulous care, and integrated celestial knowledge into every aspect of society. Yet their work was also an act of preservation, a means of safeguarding knowledge that may have originated long before their cities rose from the jungle. The heavens were not only a clock, they were a ledger, a mirror, and perhaps even a warning. The cycles of planets, the eclipses of the sun and moon, the rhythm of Venus across the horizon, all became a language through which humans could converse with the cosmos. As we leave El Caracol and trace the alignments across other sites, a realization emerges. The Maya were not merely astronomers, they were custodians of cosmic memory. Their observations, codified in stone and glyph, carried practical, ritual, and possibly prophetic significance. They sought to understand the heavens not only for the sake of measurement, but to situate themselves and their societies within a rhythm that transcended human lifetimes. In the dense, whispering jungles of the Yucatan, one can almost feel the pulse of their observation, the patience of centuries watching the sky, waiting for Venus to rise, for the eclipse to pass, for the cycle to continue. In the end, the Maya sky watchers leave us with a question that persists beyond the stones and codices. Were they merely measuring the heavens for ritual and agriculture, or were they safeguarding knowledge of cycles, catastrophes, and cosmic order that modern observers are only beginning to glimpse? The answers are hidden in shadow and light, in the alignment of windows and the tilt of pyramids, echoing silently through the jungle. And so we are left to watch, to calculate, to wonder, and to remember that the sky the Maya so carefully observed may yet contain messages older than memory itself. Chapter 18. Cenotes, portals to the underworld. Deep within the limestone heart of the Yucatan, the jungle conceals entrances to another world. These natural sinkholes, known as cenotes, appear at first as tranquil pools of water, reflecting the sky above, surrounded by dripping stalactites and moss-draped cliffs. Yet for the Maya, they were anything but ordinary. They were portals, thresholds to Xibalba, the underworld, a realm where gods, spirits, and the dead converged, where the living might communicate with forces beyond mortal comprehension. Walking to the edge of a cenote, the air shifts, the forest falls silent, and the light bends differently. It is as though the world has drawn back, revealing the hidden hinge between earth and water, life and death, seen and unseen. Archaeological investigations have revealed that cenotes were more than metaphors or ritual spaces. They were repositories of sacred objects, votive offerings, and at times, human sacrifice. Divers dredging the depths of the sacred cenote at Chichen Itzá have recovered jade beads, gold ornaments, intricately carved figurines, and ceremonial ceramics, some submerged for over a millennium. Even more haunting are the remains of human beings, their bones sometimes twisted in positions suggesting ritual death, perhaps offerings intended to appease deities, perhaps sacrifices marking cycles of celestial or terrestrial change. The water, though calm at the surface, is a reservoir of memory, holding within its depths the deliberate acts of generations seeking favor, protection, or insight. Cenotes were more than vessels of ritual. They were central to the Maya understanding of life itself. In a region where surface water is scarce and rainfall seasonal, cenotes provided a reliable source of fresh water, sustaining cities and agriculture through cycles of drought. Their practical significance intertwined seamlessly with their sacred symbolism. Water is life, and life emerges from the underworld. To drink from the cenote, to cast an offering into its depths, was to acknowledge the intimate bond between human survival and cosmic order. In this way, cenotes served simultaneously as wells of sustenance and as conduits to the divine, sites where necessity and spirituality converged in the heart of the forest. The myths surrounding cenotes speak to a layered worldview, one in which the underworld is not merely a place of death, but a repository of knowledge, power, and renewal. Xibalba was described as a labyrinthine world of rivers, caverns, and trials, ruled by death gods whose whims could bring misfortune or blessing. Cenotes, as entrances to this realm, were thresholds where the human and divine might touch, where messages and sacrifices could travel across the boundary. Inscriptions and codices suggest that offerings were timed to celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, and planetary alignments, echoing the rhythms observed in Maya astronomy. The act of sacrifice was never arbitrary. It was part of a larger order, a dialogue with forces far older than human lifetimes. Yet there is another layer of mystery surrounding the cenotes, one that hints at survival rather than symbolism alone. Paleoclimatic studies indicate that the Maya faced periods of prolonged drought, their sophisticated cities dependent on scarce rainfall and the storage of precious water. Cenotes, in this context, were not only sacred thresholds, but lifelines, reservoirs that ensured the continuity of life during harsh, unforgiving seasons. Archaeologists have noted that the distribution of settlements correlates closely with the location of cenotes, suggesting that religious reverence and pragmatic necessity were intertwined. In offering precious objects or human sacrifice, the Maya may have been acknowledging both divine authority and the fragile balance upon which their survival depended. The sacred cenote at Chichen Itzá exemplifies this dual role. Its circular walls plunge over 20 meters into shadowed depths, where limestone formations create underwater chambers and small ledges. Human remains, carefully positioned, suggest that the Maya considered this not merely a pit of water, but a sacred receptacle capable of receiving the essence of life itself. Gold and jade, objects of immense value, were placed alongside the dead, merging material wealth with spiritual significance. To the observer, the cenote is serene, yet beneath the surface lies a landscape of devotion, calculation, and perhaps a measure of desperation. The act of casting into the water is both prayer and practical, acknowledgement of life's tenuous grip in a landscape defined by its scarcity. Other cenotes scattered across the Yucatan carry equally haunting evidence. At Sagrado Cenote and elsewhere, the remains of children appear alongside offerings, suggesting that sacrifices were sometimes understood as intercessions, acts meant to appeal to the gods for rainfall, fertility, or the continuation of dynastic favor. The precise selection of victims, objects, and timing reflects a culture deeply attuned to both the seen and unseen dimensions of existence, one in which survival, ritual, and celestial observation formed an intricate web. These practices are unsettling to modern sensibilities, yet within the context of Maya cosmology, they were part of a coherent worldview in which water, death, and renewal were inseparable. The cenotes also speak to the depth of Maya engineering and adaptation. Beyond ritual, they were carefully integrated into settlement planning. Steps, platforms, and access paths were often constructed, allowing controlled approach and ritual performance. Some cenotes were linked to aqueducts and reservoirs, demonstrating an understanding of hydrology that complemented their spiritual significance. These sites were simultaneously practical and symbolic, functioning as sources of sustenance, ceremonial arenas, and markers of cosmic order. In this way, each cenote was a microcosm, reflecting the broader Maya synthesis of environment, survival, and sacred meaning. And yet, as much as has been uncovered, much remains submerged and hidden. The depths of many cenotes remain unexplored, their waters preserving secrets of offerings, inscriptions, and perhaps knowledge predating Maya civilization. Within their shadows, the line between ritual and necessity blurs. Were these sites chosen solely for their sacred associations, or were they repositories of knowledge tied to climatic cycles, survival strategies, or pre-Maya traditions? The cenotes invite speculation, urging the observer to consider the possibility that the Maya were not merely performing rites, but encoding long memory within water and stone, preserving knowledge of cycles, catastrophes, and cosmic patterns. The interplay between celestial observation and cenote ritual is striking. Just as pyramids aligned with solstices and planets, cenotes were often integrated into urban and ceremonial planning to reflect astronomical events. Light, shadow, and reflection may have been as much a part of the ritual as offerings themselves. Sunrise and sunset could illuminate certain ledges or reveal the glint of submerged objects at precise times, creating a living calendar, a ritualized measure of time and cosmic alignment. These were places where humans could engage directly with the cycles of earth and sky, where the boundaries between survival, ceremony, and cosmic observation dissolved into a single, continuous experience. In contemplating the cenotes today, one senses the layered complexity of Maya thought. These pools are at once lifelines and thresholds, repositories of memory and channels to the divine. They embody the convergence of environment, ritual, and survival, a synthesis of the practical and the sacred. Each ripple across the water's surface seems to echo centuries of offerings, prayers, and observation, a reminder that the Maya understood existence as an interplay between visible and invisible forces, between life and death, between the demands of the jungle and the guidance of the cosmos. The cenotes thus remain enduring portals, silent witnesses to devotion, knowledge, and survival. They remind us that the Maya were not merely observers of the world, but participants in it, aware of the fragility of life, the power of water, and the necessity of engaging with forces beyond human control. In their depths lie unanswered questions. What knowledge remains submerged? What memories of climate, catastrophe, or pre-Maya tradition might still be preserved beneath centuries of water and sediment? The cenotes, calm at the surface yet alive with history, invite us to peer into their shadows, to consider the wisdom encoded in their depths, and to remember that survival and ritual were inseparable in the hands of a civilization attuned to both earth and sky. Chapter 19, Maya Ball Courts, the game of life and death in the heart of the city, where plazas open to the sky and the hum of the jungle frames human activity. The ball court asserts its presence as both arena and altar, long and narrow, bordered by sloping walls adorned with carved stone markers. These courts stretch across the central plazas of Maya cities, from Copan to Chichen Itzá. The stone rims that crown the walls, sometimes etched with glyphs or sculpted figures, hint at more than sport. They mark thresholds where mortal action intersects with divine forces. Step into one of these courts and the air feels charged, as if the echo of centuries of shouts, thuds, and ritualized chants has been absorbed into the stone itself. The ball game, known as pok-ta-pok, was played with a solid rubber ball, often weighing several kilograms, struck with hips, elbows, and occasionally forearms. The rules, now partially lost, were complex, and may have varied from city to city. Some courts include stone rings mounted high upon walls, suggesting that the rare scoring of a ball through these rings was an extraordinary feat, carrying enormous symbolic weight. But it is not merely the mechanics of play that demands attention. It is the ritualized nature of the contest and the stakes that could span far beyond the game itself. In many accounts, the ball game was inseparable from myth. Codices and murals portray scenes in which gods and heroes engage in contests across cosmic courts. where victory and defeat dictate cycles of life, death, and regeneration. The ball itself is often interpreted as a symbol of the sun, the moon, or the passage of celestial bodies across the heavens. Each strike against its rubber surface echoes the tension between opposing forces, day and night, life and death, order and chaos. In some narratives, the ball court itself becomes a stage for the reenactment of these struggles, where human players embody divine actors, enacting stories older than memory, older even than the cities themselves. Yet the courts are more than symbolic stages. Archaeology reveals that they were sometimes sites of actual sacrifice, where captives, prisoners, or even members of the elite might meet their fate at the conclusion of a match. Reliefs from Uxmal and Copan depict scenes in which victors, bathed in ritual significance, deliver the final act with precision. The line between sport and death blurs, and one can imagine the tension in the air. Each movement of the ball, each swing of the hip, carries not just the chance of victory, but the weight of cosmic consequence. The audience, lining the terraces or standing atop adjacent platforms, participates in the ritual. The entire city witnesses the reenactment of forces that sustain the world itself. Ball courts were often aligned with the heavens, their long axes pointing towards solstitial or equinoctial, sunrise and sunset. The Maya, meticulous observers of celestial cycles, integrated these alignments into urban planning, creating arenas that were both earthly and cosmic. A match played at dawn or dusk might echo the movement of the sun across the horizon, each strike resonating with the rhythm of the cosmos. In this sense, the game was never mere entertainment. It was a living calendar, a ritualized observation of time, motion, and cosmic law. The players became instruments through which the city engaged with celestial cycles, the ball a vessel of symbolic meaning, and the court a conduit between human and divine. Inscriptions and murals suggest that the ball game also served political purposes. Kings and rulers might participate personally, or orchestrate games to demonstrate divine favor, martial prowess, or the legitimacy of their rule. Victories were commemorated in stone and stucco, etched into the memory of the city for generations. The courts were therefore both public spectacle and political theatre, entwining authority with ritual, spectacle with survival, and social cohesion with the enactment of mythic truths. Despite the violence embedded within the game, the courts were places of precision, discipline, and skill. The design of each arena reflects careful thought. The angles of the walls, the spacing of markers, and the dimensions of the playing field all correspond to the movement of players and the ball. This was an arena engineered to test the limits of human capability, to create a microcosm in which human effort could mirror cosmic struggle. The combination of athleticism, danger, and ritual significance rendered the ball game unique, a practice that was simultaneously corporeal, spiritual, and political. And yet, as with so much of Maya culture, the full meaning remains elusive. Scholars debate the precise rules, the selection of sacrificial victims, and the interpretation of glyphs depicting the game. Was it a form of divinely inspired combat? A living allegory of creation and destruction? A means of social control under the guise of sacred spectacle? The uncertainty preserves the aura of mystery. One can stand within a ball court today, feel the cool air rising from the jungle canopy, hear the imagined thud of the ball, and sense that these spaces were designed to make humanity conscious of both its fragility and its power, of mortality intertwined with eternity, even abandoned, overgrown, or partially reconstructed. The courts remain charged with meaning. Lianas drape across stone walls, moss softens the edges, and sunlight glints on carved glyphs, yet the energy of past contests lingers. Each court is a space where human drama, divine narrative, and cosmic rhythm converge, a threshold between worlds, echoing with centuries of impact and intention. Here, the Maya mastered not only the game, but the art of embodying the forces that shape life and death. In contemplating these arenas, one comes to see the Maya not merely as architects or warriors, but as philosophers of motion, ritual, and time. The ball game was a living meditation on the cycles of existence, a rehearsal of cosmic order enacted in the flesh. The court becomes a mirror of the universe, bounded yet infinite, dangerous yet instructive, fleeting yet eternal. And though centuries have passed, the rhythm of hip against ball, of stone against rubber resonates still, inviting reflection on the delicate balance between play, power, and the inexorable forces that govern both the heavens and the earth. Chapter 20. Collapse. The drought. Hypothesis. The canopy of the Maya lowlands stretches endlessly, a sea of green punctuated by the jagged silhouettes of temples and pyramids, their stones softened by centuries of moss and lichen. From above, the cities appear as isolated pockets of order within the relentless jungle. Yet beneath the canopy, layers of history whisper of a world in flux. It is here, amidst the ruins of Tikal, Copan, Calakmul, and countless other centers, that one encounters the lingering question: why did such a vibrant, sophisticated civilization, capable of monumental architecture, complex astronomy, and intricate governance, begin to crumble in the late 9th century? Archaeologists and paleoclimatologists converge on an explanation that resonates with the rhythms of the Earth itself. Drought. Sediment cores from lakes in the Petén Basin, isotopic analyses of cave stalagmites, and pollen records collectively reveal periods of prolonged aridity, lasting decades, perhaps even a century. These were not ordinary dry spells, they were severe, recurrent droughts, each one straining the delicate balance that sustained urban life in the rainforest. Agriculture, the foundation of Maya society, relied heavily on rainfall and the careful management of seasonal waters. Reservoirs, canals, and terraces demonstrate an acute awareness of hydrology. Yet even these sophisticated systems may have been overwhelmed by persistent climatic stress. Imagine the city at the height of its power, plazas filled with the hum of trade, the movement of artisans and farmers, the rhythmic cadence of ceremonial music. And then gradually, the skies withheld their bounty. Rainfall, once reliable, became erratic. Reservoirs shrank. Fields that had once yielded abundant maize, beans, and squash began to fail. The calculus of survival shifted subtly at first, imperceptibly, but then with increasing urgency. Water, the lifeblood of both city and ritual, became a scarce commodity, and scarcity reverberated through every layer of society. The evidence suggests that these droughts coincided with the final flourishing of the classic Maya period. Around 800 CE, major dynastic centers show signs of strain. Monumental construction slowed, inscriptions record fewer royal events, and the once elaborate system of political alliances began to fragment. Hieroglyphic records from Tikal and Copan hint at increased warfare, internal dissent, and challenges to authority. Some cities were abandoned suddenly, others slowly depopulated, and in some cases the mechanisms of power collapsed entirely. Drought alone, it seems, may have acted as both trigger and amplifier, exposing vulnerabilities inherent in a civilization that had grown highly complex and interdependent. Yet drought alone cannot account for the full scope of the Maya collapse. Societies, even under extreme environmental stress, often display remarkable resilience. Modern analogues in arid and semi-arid regions show that human ingenuity can mitigate the effects of prolonged dry periods. The Maya were no exception. Their reservoirs, such as the massive tanks at Tikal, their canal systems, and their terraced fields reflect centuries of accumulated knowledge, designed to buffer against natural fluctuations. And yet, despite these adaptations, the cities fell. The question lingers: was the drought merely a proximate cause, or did it intersect with deeper systemic fragilities, social, political, and spiritual, that rendered the collapse inevitable? Some scholars argue that the very success of the classic Maya exacerbated their vulnerability. Populations had grown to unprecedented levels, with urban centers housing tens of thousands of inhabitants. Such density amplified the impact of crop failures and water shortages, elite demands, the construction of monumental architecture, and the maintenance of elaborate rituals required enormous labor and resources. When environmental conditions shifted, the pressures on both the populace and the ruling class intensified. The social contract, once implicit in shared prosperity and ritual cohesion, began to fray. Hierarchies faltered, wars became more frequent, and political legitimacy eroded. In this view, drought did not simply kill crops, it catalyzed the unraveling of society itself. The archaeological record reveals striking regional variation. Some centers collapsed swiftly, leaving behind only ruins. Others persisted for decades longer, their populations declining gradually. This uneven pattern suggests that local conditions, soil fertility, access to water, trade connections, and political alliances played a critical role in determining resilience. Sites like Caracol in Belize, for example, show signs of survival strategies that allowed temporary adaptation, while cities in northern Yucatan, less favored by rainfall and reliant on seasonal aquifers, were more vulnerable. Even within a single city, the impact was unequal. Elites may have retained access to water and food longer than commoners, intensifying social tension and potentially fueling internal conflict. Material culture also provides subtle clues. In the final centuries of the Classic period, stelae and monumental inscriptions become less frequent, artistic expression declines, and the language of ritual and commemoration fades. It is as though the very acts that once reinforced political and cosmic order, the public ceremonies, the lavish dedication of monuments, the intricate calendar reckonings, were undermined by a world in which survival, not prestige, became paramount. In this silence, the void left by vanished authority and shattered religious expectation is palpable, echoing across the centuries. Recent studies in paleoclimatology have deepened our understanding of the Maya collapse, revealing a pattern of megadroughts that were not isolated incidents, but recurring climatic phenomena. Analysis of oxygen isotopes in stalagmites from caves such as Uxmal and Chichen Itzá shows a sequence of dry intervals punctuated by brief wetter periods, suggesting that the Maya faced cycles of stress rather than a single catastrophic event. These cycles may have been synchronized with broader climatic patterns, including shifts in the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean systems, underscoring the fragility of civilizations dependent on stable rainfall. Yet even as scientific evidence mounts, the human dimension resists quantification. How did Maya individuals experience these prolonged crises? What strategies did families and communities deploy to cope with scarcity? Did rulers attempt to mobilize resources, impose stricter social controls, or appeal to the gods in increasingly desperate ceremonies? The material record hints at answers, but the inner lives, fears, and decisions of those living through the collapse remain obscured, leaving a human mystery entwined with the environmental one. Ultimately, the drought hypothesis is compelling but incomplete. It situates the Maya collapse within a framework of environmental stress, linking the fate of cities to the rhythms of rain and the scarcity of water. Yet it also points towards something deeper: the fragility inherent in complex societies, where ecological, social, and spiritual systems are tightly interwoven. The collapse was not the result of a single factor, but the convergence of climate, population pressure, political fragmentation, and ritual expectation. It reminds us that even the most sophisticated civilizations are vulnerable to forces that operate across scales, from the drop of rain to the stroke of political rivalry, from the alignment of the heavens to the decision of a ruler. Standing among the ruins today, the silence is striking. The plazas are empty, the reservoirs dry, and the monumental stairways that once echoed with ceremonial processions now bear only the imprint of centuries. Yet the stones still speak, if one listens closely, to ingenuity, adaptation, triumph, and vulnerability. They bear witness to a civilization that reached for the heavens, measured time with unparalleled precision, and engaged fully with the rhythms of the earth, only to be tested by forces beyond control. The drought hypothesis illuminates one dimension of this story, yet the full tapestry remains incomplete, its threads weaving a pattern that challenges our understanding of resilience, memory, and the passage of time. The Maya collapse, then, is at once environmental and existential, a meditation on the interdependence of nature and culture, of human ambition and planetary constraint. Each sediment core, each stalagmite, each faded glyph is a fragment of that memory, preserved not in narrative alone, but in the very fabric of the landscape. And as we contemplate the fall of these great cities, the question persists: was the drought merely the spark that ignited collapse? Or does it point toward a deeper, more enigmatic truth, one that may lie hidden beneath layers of soil, jungle, and history, waiting to be glimpsed by those who follow the patterns of both stone and sky? Chapter 21: Collapse, the Warfare. Hypothesis: the ruins of the Maya lowlands are quiet now, but they were not always so. Stone walls and defensive structures, carefully positioned on hills and across river valleys, speak of a civilization acutely aware of threats, both human and perhaps cosmic. Archaeologists walking through sites like Tikal, Caracol, and Quirigua have unearthed the traces of sudden destruction: charred buildings, collapsed walls, and mass graves, silent witnesses to violence that once swept through the heart of these cities. The very stones of the temples and palaces seem to echo with the memory of conflict. a reminder that the Maya collapse was not solely the consequence of failing rains or exhausted soils, but also of human hands turning against human hands. Fortifications provide the first clues. Many urban centres, previously open and ceremonial, developed walls, ditches and elevated platforms in the centuries leading up to the 9th and 10th centuries. At sites such as Karakol, archaeologists note complex defensive systems, where walls are paired with moats and controlled access points, suggesting a society increasingly preoccupied with protection rather than expansion. Inscriptions on stelae and lintels from Tikal and Copan hint at persistent intercity conflict, recording victories, humiliations, and the execution of rival elites. These were not isolated skirmishes, but patterns of recurring violence, a social fabric under strain, fraying at the edges where ambition, fear, and survival intersected. Mass graves, discovered in and around ceremonial plazas, offer a more visceral testimony. Excavations reveal clustered skeletons, some showing signs of blunt trauma, others decapitated or violently bound. Such findings suggest large-scale violence, sometimes directed at captives, sometimes at entire communities. At Dos Pilas, for instance, repeated episodes of conquest and counterattack are evident in both the architectural record and skeletal remains. These burials hint at a society where warfare was not merely episodic but systematic, woven into the politics and ritual life of the state. Conflict was a means of asserting dominance, preserving honor, and, at times, exacting cosmic retribution. The causes of this violence are intertwined with environmental pressures. The droughts that afflicted the Maya lowlands reduced crop yields, strained water supplies, and concentrated populations around diminishing resources. Scarcity of maize, water, and arable land would have intensified competition between neighboring polities. Cities that once coexisted in complex networks of trade and diplomacy now found themselves vying for survival. In such a climate, the logic of aggression becomes painfully clear. Warfare is not simply a choice, but a strategy for securing lifelines, whether they be reservoirs, fertile fields, or trade routes. Yet the archaeological record also suggests that internal strife, dynastic rivalry, and social upheaval played an equally important role. Maya kingship was deeply symbolic, legitimized through rituals, monumental construction, and the recording of history in glyphs. Yet when environmental stress undermined these systems, the legitimacy of rulers was challenged. Inscriptions and reliefs show evidence of coups, assassinations, and sudden changes in rulership. Power, once stable and ceremonial, became fluid and violent. Urban centers were caught in cycles where leadership transitions coincided with external attack or internal rebellion, creating a feedback loop of instability. Evidence of burned cities further underscores this theory. Archaeological layers in Yaxchilan, Naranjo, and other sites reveal destruction by fire, sometimes selective, targeting palaces, administrative buildings, or temples. Fire may have served both practical and symbolic purposes, a means to obliterate rival authority, or a ritualized act of vengeance sanctioned by gods or ancestors. The smoke that rose centuries ago has long since cleared, but the ash and char remain, a record of moments when human conflict left physical marks across the landscape. Interestingly, the scale of warfare suggests a transition from ritualized, limited conflict to total war. Earlier classic period battles appear to have been more ceremonial, with captives taken for sacrifice and victories displayed through inscriptions and monument dedication. By the terminal classic, the evidence indicates larger-scale campaigns involving mass mobilization of soldiers, sustained sieges, and the systematic targeting of urban centers. Such transformation hints at the pressures of survival, where the stakes of defeat extended beyond honor and tribute, threatening the very subsistence of populations. Yet even as war ravaged the cities, it remains unclear whether it was a primary cause or a symptom of broader collapse. Drought, disease, social strain, and economic disruption all created conditions in which conflict became more likely. Warfare, in this sense, may have been the outward expression of deeper systemic failures. A civilization stretched to its limits, confronting both the natural and human worlds with finite tools. The Maya were skywatchers, calendar keepers, and chroniclers of celestial cycles. Perhaps they saw in these struggles echoes of cosmic tension, a reflection of cycles of creation and destruction that govern both heavens and earth. The archaeological record provides glimpses into the psychological and cultural dimensions of warfare as well. The iconography of the period is dominated by scenes of capture, sacrifice, and conquest. Murals, lintels, and stelae depict bound captives, the execution of rivals, and ritualized violence that was public, performative, and deeply symbolic. Warfare was not merely a matter of survival, it was a stage upon which kings asserted their authority. The nobility demonstrated power, and society reaffirmed its cosmological order. In this sense, the destruction wrought by conflict was both material and metaphysical, reshaping not just cities, but the spiritual landscape itself. Regional variation complicates any single narrative. Some polities fell swiftly, leaving behind smoldering ruins. Others endured, adapting through alliances or strategic retreat. In northern Yucatan, cities such as Chichen Itzá appear to have negotiated hybridized cultures, blending Maya and Toltec influences to maintain resilience. In contrast, southern lowland centers like Tikal and Copan, deeply tied to local water and trade networks, could not survive the compounded pressures of environmental stress and human conflict. The map of collapse is thus uneven, a patchwork of destruction and adaptation, of cities burned, abandoned, or repurposed, each with its own story of violence and survival. Ultimately, the warfare hypothesis does not claim to be the sole explanation for the Maya collapse. Rather, it illuminates the human dimension, the choices, ambitions, fears, and rivalries that intensified natural pressures and amplified social vulnerability. Conflict, whether rooted in dynastic ambition, resource scarcity, or ritualized necessity, transformed environmental stress into societal catastrophe. Warfare became both a mechanism and a mirror. It both propelled collapse and reflected a civilization already under existential strain. Walking among these ruins today, one senses the lingering tension in the stones. Defensive walls, charred temples, and skeletal remains are silent witnesses to a period when the Maya confronted the dual pressures of earth and society, of scarcity and ambition. Their cities, once centers of knowledge, ritual, and celestial observation, now stand empty, yet the marks of struggle remain visible, tangible, and haunting. The evidence of warfare invites reflection not only on the forces that destroyed cities, but on the resilience, vulnerability, and ingenuity of a civilization that measured time in millennia, yet faced mortality in decades. The Maya collapse, viewed through the lens of warfare, becomes a meditation on the interplay of human agency and environmental determinism. Violence emerges not merely as a destructive force, but as a complex response to stress, ambition, and cosmic consciousness. Each stela, each mass grave, each burned edifice is a fragment of a story where kings, soldiers, and citizens navigated the uncertain edge of survival, where the cycles of sky and soil converged with human intention in ways that shaped the fate of entire civilizations. In the final analysis, the warfare hypothesis complements, rather than contradicts, other explanations of the collapse. Drought, ecological strain, social fragmentation, and cosmic awareness all intersected, creating a crucible in which conflict became both inevitable and transformative. The Maya, ever attuned to the rhythms of the heavens and the earth, recorded their victories and defeats with precision, yet the full implications of their struggles were etched not only in glyphs and monuments, but in the very landscapes of their abandoned cities. The ruins of walls, plazas, and temples now invite contemplation of cycles far larger than any single battle. Reminders that human conflict, no matter how calculated or ritualized, unfolds within the broader, often unforgiving, rhythms of nature and time. Chapter 22. Collapse. The spiritual hypothesis among the ruins of the Maya lowlands. One encounters more than stone and earth. One senses the weight of belief pressing through the centuries. Here, at the heart of what we call collapse, the spiritual dimension of Maya life comes into focus. Rituals that might at first appear extravagant or excessive now reveal themselves as acts of desperation, attempts to align the human with the cosmic, to mend the fragile threads connecting mortals with the divine. Inscriptions, stelae, and murals speak repeatedly of gods angered, of the necessity of blood, of offerings made to sustain the cycles of time and avert catastrophe. The collapse, when viewed through this lens, is not only political or environmental, but profoundly spiritual, a crisis of confidence in the unseen forces that guided the world. The archaeological record offers glimpses of these intensifying rituals. Sites across the southern lowlands, from Tikal to Copan, display a marked increase in ceremonial deposits in the centuries preceding the Terminal Classic. Ceramic vessels, jade figurines, and exotic objects were interred in temples and plazas, often in quantities and arrangements that suggest urgency rather than routine devotion. Human remains, sometimes whole, sometimes fragmentary, were placed within pyramids, within cenotes, and beneath the foundations of new constructions. Scholars note a shift from the ceremonial regularity of earlier periods to a more dramatic, sometimes violent expression of faith, a ritual language that speaks of anxiety, fear, and the looming sense of cosmic imbalance. The Great Pyramids themselves, once monuments to political power and celestial observation, became stages for these intensified rites. At Chichen Itzá, El Castillo may have been more than an astronomical instrument. The pyramids served as a focal point for ceremonies aligning with solstices, equinoxes, and the apparent descent of the serpent of the heavens. Rituals here were performative, intended to engage both human participants and divine witnesses. The sequence of offerings, small at first, then increasingly elaborate, suggests that the Maya were attempting to restore harmony, to avert forces that they perceived as beyond their control. Each incense offering, each painted glyph, and each carved stela was a plea, a whisper into the rhythms of time itself. Mass sacrifices, both human and animal, indicate a society responding to perceived imbalance with extreme devotion. At sites such as the Cenote Sagrado of Chichen Itzá, layers of offerings accumulate, containing gold, jade, pottery, and bones, testaments to lives given in the hope of renewal. Scholars have debated whether these acts were primarily political, performed to reinforce the authority of kings, or whether they reflected a genuine cosmological fear, a conviction that the fabric of the universe could fray if proper propitiation was not observed. Perhaps both were true. Leadership and ritual were intertwined. The fate of rulers and their subjects depended on the favor of gods whose displeasure was visibly and painfully manifest. The symbolism of these rituals is equally compelling. Many offerings were not merely material but encoded with cosmological meaning. Jade, symbolizing life and renewal, was paired with the bones of the deceased, linking mortality with divine favor. Figurines depicted deities, ancestors, or mythical heroes, often in gestures of supplication. These objects were not static. They were instruments in a dialogue with forces the Maya believed shaped the flow of the cosmos. Through them, humans sought to influence cycles of rain, fertility, and celestial movement. In the context of the Terminal Classic collapse, these objects become traces of a civilization attempting to negotiate survival through faith, ritual, and symbolic action. Some scholars propose that these intensified rituals were also echoes of older, pre-Maya traditions, memories of catastrophic events encoded into myth and ceremonial practice. Stories of deluge, cosmic battles, and the cyclical destruction of the world appear across Mesoamerican cultures, suggesting a deep cultural memory of catastrophic upheaval. The Maya may have interpreted their crises as recurrences of these ancient cataclysms, believing that the present moment was the repetition of a cosmic drama. Their ceremonies, then, were both homage and intervention, an attempt to participate in the cycles that governed existence, and to influence outcomes that were, to human eyes, unpredictable and overwhelming. Temple architecture reflects this spiritual urgency. Many structures from the Terminal Classic are marked by layers of reconstruction, expansions, and modifications that seem less driven by political ambition and more by ritual necessity. Altars are placed in positions of prominence, ball courts aligned with solar and planetary phenomena, and plazas designed to facilitate mass observation of ceremonial acts. The urban landscape itself becomes a theatre for the performance of cosmic negotiation, a material manifestation of spiritual preoccupation. Even in their decay, these spaces communicate the intensity of faith and the anxiety of a people who believed that their world hung in delicate balance. The escalation of ritual acts also suggests a society attempting to compensate for failures or miscalculations. When crops failed or water levels receded, or droughts persisted across the lowlands, ritual was one of the few instruments available to the Maya to confront the unknown. Offerings multiplied in both scale and frequency. Murals and inscriptions increasingly depict scenes of divine retribution, of kings or captives enacting roles that mirror celestial events. The spiritual response was not passive, it was performative, deliberate, and at times, terrifyingly real. Yet this emphasis on ritual also raises questions about agency, morality, and interpretation. Were these rites driven purely by fear, or did they represent a profound understanding of the world as a web of interconnected cycles, where human action could influence celestial rhythm? Did the Maya truly believe they were reliving a cycle of cosmic destruction? Or were these ceremonies conscious reconstructions of older myths, enacted to preserve knowledge in a time of uncertainty? In either case, the archaeological record leaves an impression of societies intensely attuned to forces beyond their immediate comprehension, striving to restore order where they sensed imbalance and potential catastrophe. As we explore the sites today, the evidence of spiritual intensity is palpable. Ceramic vessels lie in niches within temples. Jade and obsidian offerings glint in the filtered sunlight, and the skeletal remains speak of devotion that could not avert decline, but sought to negotiate with it. The ruins, silent yet resonant, offer a narrative not just of collapse, but of engagement, a story of a people confronting the fragility of human existence within a cosmos of immense and often inscrutable forces. Ultimately, the spiritual hypothesis does not exclude environmental stress, warfare, or economic decline. Rather, it complements them. It suggests that the Maya collapse was not only a political or ecological phenomenon, but also a crisis of meaning and faith. Human action, belief, and ritual were inseparable from the material conditions of survival, entwined in a delicate and ultimately fragile balance. The intensity of offerings, the expansion of ceremonial architecture, and the depictions of divine wrath all point to a civilization responding to collapse as much with the heart and spirit as with labor and arms. Walking through the abandoned plazas and temples, one can almost feel the echoes of ceremonial chants and the hush of expectation as offerings were laid, prayers intoned, and rituals enacted under the weight of impending catastrophe. The Maya sought to harmonize themselves with the cosmos, to influence cycles that were larger than their cities and longer than their lifespans. And though their world ultimately fragmented, the traces of these spiritual endeavors remain, a haunting testament to a people negotiating survival at the intersection of the mortal and the divine. In the end, the spiritual hypothesis asks us to consider the Maya not only as architects, farmers, and warriors, but also as deeply reflective agents of meaning, attempting to navigate a cosmos they understood through cycles, omens, and ritual. Their collapse, then, can be seen as both a material and metaphysical event, a civilization facing the convergence of earthly scarcity, human conflict, and cosmic expectation. Through offerings, sacrifices, and ceremonies, the Maya were not merely surviving. They were conversing with time itself, echoing memories of past cataclysms and seeking to forestall their recurrence. Chapter 23. The Spanish Conquest. Fire and Erasure. The arrival of the Spanish in the Yucatan and the broader Maya world was not merely a clash of arms. It was the ignition of a deliberate and profound erasure. By the time Hernán Cortés and his successors moved through the lowlands, the great cities of the classic period had already begun to fade. Palenque, Tikal, Copan. Many of these centers were abandoned or reduced in population, their political structures fragmented, their rulers no longer commanding the expansive authority of earlier centuries. Yet the Maya were far from vanquished. They remained present in their villages, in the dense forests and river valleys, in the rituals and practices that had guided their civilization for generations. It was into this living memory that the Spanish sought to impose a new order. From the outset, the conquest was as much spiritual as military. Friars and conquistadors understood that the destruction of the Maya was incomplete without obliterating their knowledge, their connection to the sacred cycles, and the codices that recorded them. The burning of texts was a deliberate act of cultural annihilation. The sacred books, the Dresden, Madrid, and Paris codices, were vessels of astronomical calculations, ritual knowledge, genealogies of rulers, and the myths that structured Maya cosmology. To the Spanish, these books were heretical, tools of sorcery and idolatry. The flames that consumed them were not only physical, but symbolic, attempting to sever the living culture from its past, to silence the voices of the gods, the ancestors, and the prophets encoded within. Yet the Maya were not passive. Oral tradition became the vessel of memory. Stories of the creation, of the hero twins, of cyclical destruction and renewal, persisted in whispered narratives, in songs sung at the edges of villages, in festivals that merged the old and new. Rituals, though often concealed, survived beneath the veneer of imposed Catholicism. In some regions, sacred cenotes continued to receive offerings, though now often disguised or performed in secrecy. Human remains, once ritually interred in temples and pyramids, found new sanctuaries within hidden groves or private altars. These acts were not merely defiance, they were preservation, an encoded resistance ensuring that the rhythm of the Maya worldview could endure even under oppression. The violence of the conquest was multifaceted. Military campaigns razed cities, captured nobles and installed puppet rulers. The European weaponry and cavalry decimated traditional forms of defense, while epidemics introduced from across the Atlantic swept through populations, invisible yet no less deadly. Archaeological layers from this period bear the marks of fire and sudden abandonment. Ash deposits, charred structures, and mass graves hinting at both conflict and disease. Entire communities were displaced or destroyed, yet fragments remained. Temples, though stripped and desecrated, continued to evoke awe and memory. Stone stelae, glyphs, and murals, though vulnerable to both neglect and deliberate defacement, persisted as silent witnesses to the civilization that once flourished across the jungles. The erasure was intellectual as well as physical. Spanish chroniclers often recorded Maya practices with disdain, misunderstanding their cosmology as superstition, their mathematics as flawed, their art as ornamental rather than symbolic. Rituals once performed in precise alignment with celestial phenomena were condemned as pagan. The intricate astronomy of El Caracol, or the alignment of Zibil-Chaltun's Temple of the Seven Dolls, was reduced to curiosity or dismissed entirely. By suppressing literacy and ritual knowledge, the conquerors aimed to sever the continuity of learning, making each generation more dependent on the imposed European frameworks. Yet even in this suppression, knowledge endured, encoded in architecture, in dance, in oral chants, and in the persistence of communal memory. Perhaps the most profound loss was that which cannot be reconstructed from ruins or fragments. What secrets did the burned codices contain? What rituals? What precise observations? What stories of cycles, disasters, and divine interventions vanished into smoke? What knowledge of agriculture, medicine, astronomy, and cosmology, carefully recorded and transmitted for generations, was destroyed in a matter of hours? Scholars can attempt to reconstruct from surviving texts, stelae, and cross-cultural parallels. Yet the shadows of the lost works loom larger than their faint echoes. The erasure was total in some respects, leaving gaps that can never be fully filled. And yet partial survival demonstrates the resilience of memory and the ingenuity of cultural preservation. Resistance was not only spiritual or cultural, it was also subtle and adaptive. Communities adapted rituals to fit within the constraints imposed by colonial authorities. Patron saints were aligned with ancient deities, Christian symbols incorporated into traditional ceremonies. Pilgrimages continued under the guise of Catholic festivals. Language itself became a vessel of survival, with glyphic knowledge and symbolic terms encoded within everyday speech, prayer, and song. Even as written codices were destroyed, the rhythm and pattern of the Maya worldview persisted, hidden in plain sight, carried forward by the living. This persistence speaks to a deeper truth. Civilizations cannot be extinguished solely by fire or sword. Ideas, when deeply rooted, find channels through which to endure. The Maya knew this instinctively. Their rituals, their codices, their observations of the stars, and their storytelling all functioned as repositories of continuity. The Spanish could conquer lands, install governors, burn books, and enforce new religious practices, yet the Maya worldview, though fragmented and muted, remained vibrant. It endured underground, encoded not only in memory, but in the very structure of cities, in the alignment of pyramids, in the enduring presence of cenotes and sacred spaces. The conquest, then, is not merely a story of destruction, but of survival through adaptation. What was lost is mourned in archaeological silence, in the burned pages of codices, and in gaps within the historical record. What was preserved whispers through centuries, in ritual, in language, in family memory, in the quiet endurance of cultural practices. The Spanish may have imposed fire and erasure, yet the pulse of the Maya persisted. a rhythm that outlasted armies, disease, and the burning of knowledge. And so, the ruins of the post-conquest period are more than echoes of defeat. They are evidence of persistence. They remind us that culture is not solely dependent on monuments or manuscripts. It lives in the human capacity for memory, adaptation, and sacred observation. Even when the visible markers of civilization are scorched or shattered, the essence endures, encoded in those who remember, who retell, who perform, and who protect fragments of the past. Through these threads, the Maya continued, and continue, to speak to the future. The chapter of fire and erasure concludes not with absolute finality, but with a subtle and haunting endurance. The flames consumed what could be seen, what could be catalogued, what could be read, yet the pulse of culture, of knowledge, of memory survived in the shadows. The Maya were not silenced. They adapted, hid, and transmitted, leaving traces that invite us to look closer, to read between the lines, and to consider what was intentionally lost and what continues to breathe beneath the surface of history. Chapter 24, Surviving Maya. Echoes in the present. The forested hills and sun-baked plains of the Yucatan, the highlands of Guatemala, the river valleys of Chiapas. These lands, once the stage for grand cities and ceremonial centers, are not empty. They are alive with memory, with the pulse of a people who have endured, who have witnessed conquest, collapse, and centuries of erasure, yet continue to weave their presence into the fabric of the modern world. Today, millions of Maya descendants move through these landscapes, tending to fields, constructing homes, performing ceremonies, and speaking languages that echo through time. Their survival is quiet yet profound, a living testament to resilience that cannot be recorded in codices alone. Language is one of the most intimate and persistent vessels of survival. While the glyphs and texts of the ancient Maya were burned, silenced, or misunderstood, the words themselves were never entirely lost. Quichua, Yucatec, Quechua, and dozens of other Maya tongues continue to be spoken across communities, carrying within them not only syntax and vocabulary but encoded worldviews, subtle understandings of astronomy, agriculture, and ritual, passed from parent to child, from elder to youth. To speak these languages is to engage with a lineage of observation, memory, and cosmology, the very frameworks through which the ancient Maya understood their place within the cycles of sun, moon, and stars. Within everyday conversation, within songs and prayers, lie fragments of knowledge that the flames of conquest could not consume. Material culture, too, reveals continuity. The weaving of textiles, in particular, preserves patterns that are both aesthetic and symbolic, encoding stories, status, and cosmological knowledge. Across villages, women still dye cotton and spin fibers using techniques unchanged for centuries, producing garments whose intricate motifs echo ancient glyphs, sacred animals, and celestial symbols. Each thread can be read as a line of memory, a deliberate preservation of meaning. Beyond utility, weaving becomes a silent archive, a code that carries forward a worldview that has survived the interruptions of history. It is here, in the tactile and visual, that the persistence of culture can be most intimately felt. Ritual practice also continues, often blending pre-Columbian and Catholic elements, a syncretism born of necessity and devotion. Ceremonies marking planting and harvest, celestial observations, and life milestones are infused with a sense of continuity, reaching back to classic Maya cities. Offerings of maize, candles, and incense echo those once placed in pyramids and temples. Sacred spaces, whether in hidden groves, under saber trees, or at cenotes, remain places of connection with the unseen, places where the boundaries between the earthly and the divine blur. In these rituals, one can sense the echo of ceremonies performed in Tikal or Copan, their original purpose refracted but not extinguished. Oral histories are perhaps the most subtle, yet revealing repositories of knowledge. Elders recount stories of hero twins, creation myths, cycles of destruction and renewal, and the adventures of gods who shaped the heavens and the earth. These narratives are not static. They adapt to new contexts, yet retain the skeleton of memory. Within them, one may detect echoes of calendars, agricultural cycles, moral lessons, and warnings derived from observation of the natural world. In listening carefully, one begins to recognize patterns, astronomical cues embedded in myth, agricultural advice intertwined with legend, cosmological cycles mirrored in the rhythm of daily life. These stories are not relics, they are living guides, waiting for those attuned to rediscover the threads of knowledge concealed within. Communal practices, too, serve as vessels of survival. Markets, festivals, and communal labor preserve social structures reminiscent of pre-Columbian organization. Even subtle details, the alignment of village centers to cardinal directions, the timing of ceremonial feasts with solstices and equinoxes, suggest continuity with ancestral systems of observation and ritual. Here, the past is not displayed in stone monuments or codices, but enacted daily, lived in rhythm with land, sky, and water. The knowledge persists, not as static record, but as living, breathing practice, accessible to those who know how to read the world around them. Culinary traditions also carry memory. Maize, the sacred grain, remains central to diet and ritual, prepared in countless forms that reflect ancient techniques. The cycles of planting, harvesting, and sharing corn are encoded with lessons of ecology, sustainability, and connection to the earth, passed down in subtle detail that modern observers may overlook. Even the ritual preparation of food, the offering of tamales, or the brewing of ceremonial beverages, preserves an understanding of cycles, both human and cosmic, that were once inscribed in temples and codices. Yet survival is not only in what is practiced visibly, it is also in what is hidden, disguised, and adapted. Cultural memory is layered and adaptive, ensuring continuity even under pressures of erasure. Catholic saints become inheritors of older deities. Rituals are performed under the guise of sanctioned festivals. Sacred spaces are relocated or transformed. The essence of knowledge persists, camouflaged within practices deemed permissible, a quiet defiance against centuries of suppression. To observe closely is to witness the persistence of a worldview, resilient and adaptive, encoded in human action and memory rather than in written record alone. In the modern era, Maya knowledge has begun to surface in new ways. Anthropologists, linguists, and archaeologists increasingly recognize the depth and continuity of these practices, while Maya communities themselves assert sovereignty over their history, language, and sacred knowledge. The resurgence of interest in traditional medicine, astronomy, and cosmology reveals layers of understanding that have endured despite centuries of attempted destruction. What was once considered lost or fragmentary begins to reveal patterns, a continuity stretching back millennia. And so, the Maya of today are not simply heirs of a distant past. They are the living bridge to it. Their languages, their textiles, their rituals, their oral histories, and their rhythms of life are not mere remnants. They are vessels of knowledge, waiting to be read with patience, respect, and insight. In observing these practices, one begins to glimpse the sophistication, the subtlety, and the resilience of a civilization that survived conquest, collapse, and erasure. What was hidden is still there, waiting to be rediscovered, waiting to reveal the echoes of cycles, cosmology, and understanding embedded in a living tradition. This continuity challenges the way history is often told. The Maya are not confined to ruins or codices. They are present, walking among the living, speaking in tongues that have endured for centuries, weaving stories and threads that link past and present. The echoes are subtle, often concealed in daily life, yet they endure. Proof that even when civilizations are subjected to fire, erasure, and conquest, memory finds a way to persist. The Maya of today are the living testament to this resilience, and through them, the past continues to breathe, to speak, and to guide those who seek to understand it. The chapter closes not with finality, but with reverent recognition. The knowledge that survived centuries of suppression is not fully catalogued or understood. It waits, layered within language, ritual, craft, and story. It waits for careful observation, for patient listening, for those who can perceive the enduring pulse of a civilization that refused to vanish entirely. In the weaving of textiles, in the timing of festivals, in the oral recounting of myths, the Maya of the present continue to speak to the future, carrying echoes of a world that persists beyond ruins, beyond codices, and beyond fire. Chapter 25. Lost Cities Beneath the Jungle. Canopy beneath the dense, humid canopy of the Maya lowlands. The jungle breathes with life and secrecy. For centuries, explorers, archaeologists, and locals alike have glimpsed the edges of ancient stone, hints of plazas and pyramids swallowed by forest, vines encasing monuments, moss cloaking inscriptions. The canopy is both protector and concealer, a natural veil that has preserved centuries of civilization while hiding it from the eyes of the outside world. And yet, in the last decade, technology has begun to peel back the layers of this living shroud. LiDAR, light detection and ranging, sweeps above the trees with imperceptible beams, illuminating landscapes previously invisible, revealing structures and networks that have lain hidden for centuries. Entire cities emerge from the digital fog, fortresses perched on hilltops, sprawling causeways connecting settlements, plazas aligned with celestial phenomena, and residential compounds that suggest a complexity far greater than previously imagined. These discoveries are nothing short of revolutionary. Where once archaeologists believed the Maya world was punctuated by isolated city-states, LiDAR data hints at a networked civilization, interconnected by raised roads, canals, and possibly trade or ritual routes stretching for miles. The density of these sites challenges prior assumptions. Small villages, fortified towns, and ceremonial centers all appear as threads in a vast, intricate web, suggesting that the Maya were not merely urban planners, but orchestrators of an environment harmonized with both human and cosmic rhythms. The scale is staggering. Estimates now suggest that tens of millions of people may have lived in these lowlands at the height of Maya civilization. Their labor-shaping landscapes, carving limestone, channeling water, and constructing monumental architecture now hidden beneath the ever-encroaching forest. As we explore these newly illuminated cities, questions emerge. Why were they abandoned and forgotten? Certainly, the classical narratives of drought, warfare, and spiritual upheaval played a role, but the jungle itself became a collaborator in erasure. Trees reclaim walls, roots shatter stone, and the living forest conceals with a meticulous patience that mirrors time itself. Yet paradoxically, this same dense vegetation preserved much of what might otherwise have succumbed to erosion, looting, and human development. The forest becomes both adversary and archivist, holding secrets in plain sight, waiting for a technology or eye capable of discerning them. Fortresses, revealed through LiDAR, hint at a world fraught with tension. Elevated platforms, walls, and bastions suggest that the Maya were not only builders of ceremonial grandeur, but also architects of defense. These structures, often invisible from the ground due to tree cover, indicate that fortification was widespread, that threats, perhaps both human and environmental, were ever present. Yet their placement is not merely practical. Many fortresses align with topographical or celestial markers, suggesting that the Maya conceived of defense not only in tactical terms, but as part of a broader cosmological vision. Each stone, each wall, seems imbued with intention, communicating both earthly control and sacred observance. The network of causeways, the Sakbiob, stretches across the lowlands like arteries of movement, yet their full extent is only now becoming visible. Some stretch for dozens of miles, connecting sites that were once thought distant and isolated. Their purpose remains partially enigmatic. Were they practical roads for trade and travel, ceremonial paths connecting sacred centers, or markers of cosmological principles mapping the heavens upon the earth? The discovery of these causeways forces a reconsideration of Maya logistics and social organization. They suggest that movement, exchange, and ritual were tightly interwoven, that the Maya world was far more dynamic and interconnected than previously understood. Among the newly detected sites, residential compounds and small villages appear in surprising density. These are not merely satellite settlements, but fully integrated communities, often featuring ball courts, temples, and storage structures. The implication is profound. The Maya civilization may have been far larger, both in population and in spatial reach, than the historical record has preserved. The social and political complexity required to manage such a civilization, coordination of labor, resource distribution, ritual observance, and defense, becomes almost unimaginable when considering the scale of these hidden urban landscapes. The forest, once perceived as an empty expanse, now emerges as a repository of civilization, challenging our understanding of what it means for a society to be lost. The inscriptions, stelae, and monuments that occasionally surface from beneath vegetation further complicate the narrative. While many of these sites are still largely unexcavated, hints of glyphs suggest continuity and sophistication in record-keeping, genealogy, and cosmological observation. What stories, what histories, what knowledge lie beneath the canopy, waiting to be uncovered? The possibility is tantalizing. Suppressed or forgotten sites could hold records of political alliances, astronomical observations, or even cataclysmic events previously unknown. Each hidden city may contain fragments of a more complete history, revealing connections between regions, clarifying the extent of trade networks, or shedding light on previously mysterious cultural transformations. The secrecy of these sites also raises questions about the dissemination of knowledge. How much of what has been discovered has been fully shared with the public or scientific community? For decades, political, logistical, and academic factors have limited excavation and publication. Some discoveries, once revealed, were cautiously catalogued or partially obscured due to preservation concerns or the sensitive nature of artifacts and human remains. This creates a tantalizing possibility that much of the Maya world remains, for now, both physically hidden and intellectually inaccessible, a shadow archive of human endeavor waiting for careful exploration. Climate, too, plays a role in concealment and survival. The thick canopy, nourished by centuries of tropical rainfall, has both hidden ruins and helped preserve them. Water management systems, reservoirs, and canals revealed beneath the foliage demonstrate the ingenuity of the Maya in adapting to their environment. They transformed the challenges of rainfall, seasonal drought, and terrain into infrastructure that supported dense populations and complex urban centers. Yet, the jungle's resilience is mirrored by its capacity for reclamation, slowly enveloping the traces of human ingenuity in a green mantle, an ongoing dialogue between civilization and nature. Even as these discoveries reshape archaeological understanding, they also transform imagination. For the first time, maps of the Maya world reveal a labyrinth of human activity beneath the forest canopy, suggesting a civilization that was both vast and intricately networked. The notion of lost cities shifts from metaphor to tangible reality. These are not legends or exaggerations, but empirical evidence of human ambition, resilience, and adaptation. Yet the true scale remains unknowable. LiDAR reveals surface features but cannot fully capture the daily life, belief systems, and knowledge encoded within these communities. The cities are partially revealed but still whisper, not speak, leaving gaps that invite both scientific inquiry and reflective speculation. The rediscovery of these hidden sites also emphasizes the fragility of knowledge. Without preservation and careful study, the forest could reclaim much of what has been revealed. And without engagement with descendant communities, the intangible memory embedded in living Maya culture might be overlooked. The surviving oral traditions, weaving practices, and ritual knowledge are essential complements to the physical record, providing context, continuity, and depth to the structures unearthed beneath the jungle canopy. The past and present converge here, demanding a holistic approach to understanding civilization, one that honors both material evidence and living memory. Ultimately, the lost cities beneath the jungle canopy are a reminder of human persistence, of the capacity to build, adapt, and thrive, even in environments that seem insurmountable. They reveal the scale and sophistication of the Maya world, hint at the intellectual and spiritual life of societies often obscured by time, and challenge contemporary understanding of civilization itself. Yet, they also caution humility. Much remains hidden, subject to the slow reclamation of nature and the selective preservation of knowledge. The full story of the Maya, its breadth, its intricacy, its innovations, and its mysteries remains tantalizingly out of reach, a testament to both the limits of observation and the enduring power of human memory, encoded in landscape, stone, and forest. Chapter 26, Echoes of Atlantis, a pre-flood connection. In the dense, shadowed corridors of memory that stretch across human history, myths of cataclysm and rebirth appear again and again, like a pulse that refuses to fade. Among these narratives, the Maya stand out, not simply for their sophisticated calendars or monumental cities, but for the rhythm of destruction and regeneration that echoes throughout their mythology. Tales of floods, of civilizations swept away, of gods judging the deeds of men, are not confined to the jungles of Mesoamerica. Across continents, from Mesopotamia to Egypt, and even in the enigmatic dialogues of Plato, stories arise of a world once whole, undone by water, fire, or celestial decree. The question lingers: could these stories share a common memory, a distant echo of events predating the rise of recorded history, preserved in symbols, rituals, and the cycles of the Maya long count? The Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Quiché Maya, speaks in layered allegory of creation, destruction, and recreation. It recounts gods attempting to craft humankind, experimenting with clay and wood, enduring failures, and finally achieving balance through maize, the sacred grain that sustains life. But interwoven in these narratives are episodes of deluge, great floods that sweep away entire generations, divine wrath that tests the fidelity and resilience of mankind. Scholars note that while these myths are deeply rooted in Mesoamerican culture, they bear structural resemblance to older flood myths. The Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia tells of Utnapishtim, who survives the waters with a vessel, preserving life for a new world. The Egyptian texts recount the periodic inundation of the Nile as both life-giving and potentially destructive. And Plato's Atlantis describes a civilization lost beneath the sea, erased in a single, cataclysmic moment. What is remarkable is not merely the recurrence of flood imagery, but the precision with which the Maya encode time and catastrophe. Their long count calendar is built to track cycles that span thousands of years, a meticulous chronometry that dwarfs ordinary human lifespans. Some researchers propose that this system was not simply a tool for agriculture or ritual, but a repository of memory, a way to encode historical catastrophes so that knowledge of these cycles could persist. When the Popol Vuh describes floods and cosmic upheaval, could it be drawing upon a preserved awareness of pre-flood events, a record of survival encoded not in stone or papyrus, but in narrative, song, and ceremony? Cross-cultural analysis deepens the mystery. In Mesopotamia, flood narratives carry the imprint of a world periodically reshaped by water, where gods judge humanity and order is restored through survival and preservation. Similarly, Egyptian cosmology emphasizes cyclical destruction and rebirth, with the Nile's flooding symbolizing both chaos and renewal. Even Plato's Atlantis, often dismissed as allegory, presents a precise account of a civilization undone by natural cataclysm, with survivors transmitting wisdom to later generations. When viewed through this comparative lens, the Maya myths seem less isolated, less purely regional, and more like a continuation of an older, global memory, a mnemonic thread linking distant peoples across time. Archaeology provides subtle, yet compelling support. Sites such as cenotes, the sacred sinkholes of the Yucatan, reveal deposits of ritual offerings, including human remains, placed into subterranean waters. Could these have been acts of supplication to prevent or survive cosmic upheaval, echoes of ancestral memory warning that catastrophe was possible? The spatial organization of cities, the alignment of pyramids and observatories to solstices, equinoxes and planetary cycles suggest that the Maya were attuned to celestial patterns that might mark not only agricultural seasons, but potentially cosmic danger. The recurrence of these alignments across generations and geographies could reflect an inherited understanding of planetary or environmental cycles, encoded as ritual, architecture, and myth. The idea of a pre-flood memory encoded in myth raises profound questions about the transmission of knowledge. Oral tradition is often dismissed as fragile, yet in cultures where writing was partially destroyed, such as the Maya under Spanish conquest, oral histories became crucial carriers of continuity. Songs, prayers, and myths are compressed forms of information designed to endure. Repetition, metaphor, and ritual reinforce retention, allowing knowledge to survive even when material records are lost. Could the tales of flood and renewal, told generation after generation, be a mnemonic repository of events that occurred in a distant prehistorical past? When considering Atlantis, the connection becomes more speculative, but no less compelling. Plato situates Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Heracles, describing a technologically advanced civilization destroyed by flood. The story may be allegorical, yet it resonates with flood myths worldwide. If one allows for the possibility that human memory can survive in fragmented, symbolic form, it is not implausible that the Maya inherited aspects of this memory, abstracted and adapted into their cosmology. The echoes are faint, obscured by thousands of years, but patterns emerge. Civilizations that flourished, knowledge that endured, calamities that were survived and encoded as myth, astronomy, too, intersects with this speculative narrative. The Maya closely observed Venus, eclipses, solstices, and other celestial phenomena, embedding these observations within ritual and myth. Some scholars suggest that these celestial markers may have been used to track cyclical events with historical significance, including cataclysms. If cycles of cosmic disruption, meteor impacts, solar flares, or planetary alignments were recorded, they could manifest as recurring narratives of destruction, preserved in myth but interpreted as divine or cosmological instruction. The alignment of myth and astronomy becomes a bridge between observed celestial patterns and remembered terrestrial upheaval, a language of symbols connecting generations separated by centuries. Yet, caution is essential. The comparison of myths across cultures can be seductive but also misleading. Similarities may arise independently, the result of universal human experience with water, seasonal change, and mortality. Floods are common natural events. Catastrophic deluges could occur in multiple regions without necessitating a single shared memory. Nevertheless, the specificity of certain features, the emphasis on cyclical destruction, the preservation of knowledge through select survivors, the integration with precise calendrical systems, raises the possibility that some threads are more than coincidental. The question of inheritance also prompts reflection on the mechanisms of cultural survival. If the Maya were indeed carriers of a pre-flood memory, it was preserved through careful observation, ritual, and encoded myth. Pyramids, ball courts, causeways, and observatories were not only functional structures, but potentially mnemonic devices, spatially representing cosmological truths. Calendrical inscriptions on stelae and codices, surviving the destruction of conquest, are reminders of the deliberate effort to retain knowledge through material, symbolic, and oral forms. Survival, in this sense, becomes both practical and epistemic, safeguarding not only life but memory itself. In exploring the echoes of Atlantis and the possible pre-flood connections, one is drawn into a contemplative space where history, myth, and memory intersect. The Maya myths are not mere stories. They are vessels of encoded knowledge, carefully crafted and transmitted, capable of preserving insight across millennia. The parallels with Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Atlantis narrative hint at a global pattern, a recognition of human vulnerability, the recurrence of catastrophe, and the imperative to remember. Whether these myths reflect literal events, symbolic truths, or a mixture of both, they speak to the profound human need to map experience onto story, to render the incomprehensible navigable through memory and ritual. Ultimately, the investigation is not about proving a single narrative of pre-flood history. It is about acknowledging the depth and complexity of human remembrance, the resilience of memory encoded in myth, and the possibility that civilizations separated by distance and time might share an underlying awareness of the world's fragility. The Maya long count, the Popol Vuh, and the precise alignments of observatories are fragments of this continuity, a tapestry woven over millennia, pointing toward truths that are both visible and veiled. The echoes of Atlantis, the persistent rhythm of flood and renewal invite reflection. What knowledge survives in the architecture, the myth, and the stars? And how much remains concealed, waiting for patient observation, careful interpretation, and reverent listening to the whispers of an ancient world? Chapter 27, Memory in Stone. The last Maya codices. Among the countless records once maintained by the Maya, only 4 codices remain, fragile testaments to a civilization whose written memory was almost entirely extinguished. These slender folded books, painted on bark paper and treated with lime to resist decay, carry the weight of centuries. Each page is densely covered with glyphs, intricate illustrations of gods, stars, rituals, and calendrical notations. A silent archive of knowledge painstakingly assembled and jealously guarded. The mere survival of these texts is astonishing. Consider the centuries of conquest, fire, and decay. And yet these 4 codices persist, whispering fragments of what was once an immense and precise system of record-keeping. They are portals into a consciousness attuned to the cycles of the cosmos, the rhythms of ritual, and the flow of human history, their pages offering glimpses of a memory almost lost. The Dresden Codex, the most complete of the surviving manuscripts, presents a meticulous calendar of Venus, tracking its appearances and disappearances with extraordinary accuracy. For the Maya, Venus was not merely a bright point in the sky, but a messenger of portent, a herald of war and ritual. The Codex charts these cycles with a precision that modern astronomers can still confirm, revealing a people whose observation of the heavens was not casual, but deeply integrated with social and spiritual life. Within its pages, one sees lists of sacrifices, ceremonies timed to celestial alignments, and prophetic warnings, as if the Codex itself were a tool to align mortal action with the unfolding of cosmic law. Every line, every glyph, carries meaning that transcends mere notation. It is a dialogue between humanity and the heavens. The Madrid Codex, partially damaged yet enduring, conveys a different dimension of Maya life. Its pages are filled with agricultural guidance, rituals of fertility, and calendars marking auspicious days. Scenes of deities presiding over corn, rain, and mountains are interspersed with instructions for ceremony, suggesting that the Maya wrote not only to preserve knowledge but to actively guide communal life. Each image and glyph functions as a mnemonic device, a carefully designed reminder of the interplay between natural cycles and human obligation. The Codex is both a practical guide and a spiritual map, linking earthly toil with celestial observation. Its survival seems almost intentional, as though these few texts were chosen to carry forward essential knowledge in anticipation of upheaval. In contrast, the Paris Codex emphasizes divination and prophecy. Its fragmented pages, marked by the erosion of time, nonetheless reveal complex ritual sequences, the staging of ceremonies, and the observation of omens. Here, the Maya's preoccupation with fate, cycles, and cosmic harmony is evident. The Codex is less about instruction and more about reflection, a mirror held up to the possible futures of those who read it. Its survival feels almost eerie, for it offers a glimpse into the minds of people who may have sensed the fragility of their own world, who may have recorded knowledge as a safeguard, a last warning against the forces, both earthly and cosmic, that could undo them. Finally, the Grolier Codex, long controversial, has more recently been verified as authentic. Its pages are painted with intense colors, depicting deities and celestial phenomena in a style more symbolic than literal. The Codex's survival is particularly mysterious, discovered long after the others had become known, hidden as if by design. Its contents, astronomical tables and ritual guidance, suggest that it, too, served a protective function, knowledge encoded to endure time, to outlast generations, and perhaps even to survive attempts at deliberate destruction. That these 4 codices alone remain of a once vast library hints at selective preservation, whether by natural accident or deliberate human intent. The near-total destruction of Maya books by Spanish friars, most famously under Diego de Landa, casts a long shadow over these remaining codices. The missionaries sought to erase what they called heresy, but in doing so, they inadvertently amplified the significance of what survived. The codices became rarities, extraordinary fragments of a world almost entirely obliterated, and their scarcity amplifies their power. Each surviving manuscript is a concentrated capsule of thought, carrying the resonance of entire libraries and archives that no longer exist. In their silence, they challenge the modern observer to consider not only what was written, but also what was deliberately concealed, destroyed, or lost. The codices, moreover, are not merely passive relics. They are interactive memory devices, combining art, mathematics, and observation into a form that could be read and interpreted across generations. The glyphs operate simultaneously as calendar markers, mnemonic symbols, and narrative elements. One could, in principle, track the cycle of Venus, plan agricultural rituals, and interpret omens in a single sitting. The Maya Codex is both a functional instrument and a spiritual guide, a layered object in which knowledge is embedded, encoded in ways that require careful attention, understanding, and, perhaps, initiation. Their survival also raises profound questions about intention and selection. Were these 4 codices spared by chance, or were they deliberately hidden, protected by those who understood the stakes of cultural annihilation? It is tempting to imagine that certain texts were deemed essential, repositories of knowledge meant to outlast catastrophe. The alignment between celestial observation, ritual instruction, and prophetic warning hints at a civilization keenly aware of its vulnerability, of the potential for social and environmental collapse, and of the necessity to encode survival, not only in architecture and oral tradition, but also in the permanence of written record. the silence of the codices is as haunting as their content. Unlike a living oral tradition, they offer no commentary, no interpretation beyond the symbols themselves. Each glyph is a frozen voice, speaking in the precise, deliberate language of mathematics, ritual, and observation, yet leaving space for contemplation. What knowledge did the Maya consider too dangerous, too sacred, or too profound to survive freely? What warnings were encrypted in these pages, intelligible only to those initiated in the understanding of cycles, omens, and cosmic law? The gaps in their content, the missing codices, the deliberate destruction, all suggest that much remains beyond reach, hidden in silence, waiting for the careful observer to discern its patterns. In the end, the last Maya codices are more than surviving books. They are testimonies to human resilience, to the persistence of memory against the forces of erasure. They remind us that knowledge, once encoded, can endure across centuries, preserved in form, symbol, and structure, even when its civilization is threatened by conquest, climate, or cosmic uncertainty. The codices are both record and warning, instruction and enigma, invitations to contemplate the cycles of time, human fragility, and the possibility that the Maya left us guardians of essential truths. In considering these texts, one cannot escape the question of what was deliberately hidden and what survives by chance. Each codex is a fragment, but together they form a window into the mindset of a people who sought to comprehend the heavens, predict the movements of planets, honor the cycles of nature, and encode their wisdom for future generations. They are silent, yet in their silence, they speak across the centuries, inviting modern observers to engage with a memory almost lost and to ask, what truths were the Maya trying to preserve, and what warnings might still resonate today? Chapter 28, The Collapse. Revisited, mystery without end. The dense jungles of the Maya lowlands conceal more than stone pyramids and crumbling plazas. They guard questions that have lingered for over a millennium. Here, amid the towering cebas and the slow murmur of hidden rivers, the silence is thick, not merely of absence, but of unanswered inquiry. The Maya collapse, which unfolded gradually between the 8th and 10th centuries CE, cannot be confined to a single cause. The remnants of cities such as Tikal, Copan, and Calakmul present a tapestry woven from drought, warfare, social upheaval, and spiritual turmoil, threads that are intertwined in ways that resist simple explanation. To walk these sites is to enter a realm where human ambition and natural forces intersected, leaving a legacy of questions rather than conclusions. Lake beds and stalagmites speak of prolonged droughts, periods when rainfall dwindled to fractions of its previous abundance. Archaeological studies reveal pollen layers shifting, soils eroding, reservoirs running dry, and crops failing year after year. Inscriptions on stelae and murals hint at the anxiety of rulers and their subjects. Ritual acts intensified, offerings multiplied. Yet even these gestures could not summon the rains that vanished. The evidence suggests that nature alone could stress a civilization to breaking. Yet the story is never purely environmental. The Maya were engineers of water, master builders of reservoirs, canals, and terraces. Yet even their ingenuity had limits when confronted with a climactic anomaly of centuries-long severity. Drought may have been a catalyst, but it was not the sole architect of collapse. Warfare, etched into stone in the form of fortifications, charred structures, and mass graves, tells another part of the story. As environmental pressures mounted, competition for dwindling resources intensified. The elite struggled to maintain control, alliances fractured, and cities once bound by diplomacy turned against one another. The architecture of defense, walls, ditches, and elevated causeways speaks of fear as much as strategy, a civilization attempting to protect itself from both internal and external threats. Yet even these measures could not prevent the unraveling of political structures that had persisted for centuries. Evidence suggests that warfare was both symptom and cause, a feedback loop of scarcity, insecurity, and escalating violence. Spiritual crisis adds a third, less tangible dimension. Rituals became more elaborate, sacrifices more frequent, as if the gods themselves had turned their faces from the people. The records that survive hint at desperation, a populace attempting to reconcile human action with cosmic order. Temples were enlarged, ceremonial calendars meticulously maintained, and offerings to deities multiplied, sometimes at great human cost. Were these acts merely tradition? Or was there an acute sense of living through a cosmic event, an echo of destruction long remembered in myth and encoded in the cycles of the long count calendar? The Maya may have interpreted the convergence of drought, famine, and conflict as a repetition of primordial catastrophe, a recurrence of cycles inscribed in memory far older than their recorded history. Beyond the physical and spiritual, deeper mysteries linger, resisting the clarity of empirical analysis. LiDAR surveys now reveal sprawling networks of hidden structures, causeways stretching for miles, fortresses previously unseen, and entire urban centers swallowed by jungle. These discoveries suggest that the Maya world was far more interconnected than previously believed, a complex system of trade, communication, and ritual pathways. What remains buried could alter our understanding of societal organization, economic systems, and the interplay of local and regional power. The collapse, then, may not be a single event, but a multi-scalar phenomenon, cascading across regions, amplified by both environmental vulnerability and socio-political fragility. Memory itself becomes a central character in this narrative. The Maya recorded their history in stone, wood, and bark, yet much of this memory was deliberately destroyed during the Spanish conquest. Codices burned, temples desecrated, oral traditions suppressed. The erasure was deliberate, a silencing of knowledge and ritual. What survives today? Scattered inscriptions, oral histories, the codices that endured, offers only glimpses into a sophisticated civilization whose final centuries are veiled in absence. The collapse is therefore not only a story of environmental, social, and spiritual breakdown, but also a story of lost memory. What we see in the ruins is shadow and echo. The full breadth of knowledge and intent has vanished, leaving gaps that modern scholars, archaeologists, and dreamers alike can only attempt to fill. The Maya understood time in cycles far beyond human lifespans. The long count calendar, with its precise reckoning of baktuns, katuns, and tons, frames human events within vast cosmic intervals. Catastrophe for the Maya may not have been an anomaly, but a predictable recurrence. The collapse, then, could be interpreted as one such cycle, its devastation anticipated, its rituals attempts to mitigate or survive its inevitability. This perspective does not diminish the suffering of those who lived through it, but reframes it as part of a cosmic rhythm, a civilization in dialogue with cycles of creation, destruction, and rebirth that extend beyond any single human lifetime. Yet even as we trace the threads of drought, warfare, and spiritual unrest, the question persists: was there something more? The echo of pre-flood myths, shared globally, finds resonance in Maya cosmology. The cyclical destruction of humanity, floods, divine judgment, and renewal. Comparative mythology points to similar stories in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the distant islands of the Atlantic. Could the collapse of the Maya be, in part, a replay, a memory encoded across generations of events far earlier than the codices themselves record? The ruins, silent and overgrown, seem to whisper that the past is never wholly gone. That memory, encoded in stone, myth, and ritual, carries warnings we are only beginning to decipher. Walking through the deserted plazas and shadowed causeways, one senses the magnitude of what has been lost. Great cities, once teeming with life, lie beneath the canopy, their monuments broken, their hieroglyphs weathered, their stories fragmentary. Yet within this silence, there is continuity. Descendants of the Maya still speak their languages, maintain rituals, and weave cosmologies into daily life. What was destroyed in the collapse and conquest survives in subtle forms, hidden in memory, ritual, and cultural practice. The ruins remind us that collapse is not merely an ending, but a transformation, a transition between eras where knowledge, encoded or lost, persists in forms we may only partially recognize. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the Maya collapse is not found in seeking definitive causation, but in embracing ambiguity. No single factor, drought, warfare, spiritual crisis, or lost memory, sufficiently explains the decline. Instead, the collapse appears as a convergence, a multidimensional event that resists tidy narratives. It reminds us that civilizations are living systems, sensitive to environmental pressures, social dynamics, and cosmic perceptions. Their fragility is intrinsic, their endurance remarkable, and their memory, though often obscured, remains a guidepost for those who come after. The silence of the ruins, the shadowed plazas, the overgrown temples, all speak to a truth that is as poetic as it is unsettling. Memory itself may be the greatest ruin of all. In the quiet, one can almost hear the echoes of life, ritual, and knowledge that once thrived here, fragments of a civilization attuned to the cosmos, the cycles of time, and the inevitability of change. And as we leave the jungle, moving beyond the reach of stone and canopy, we carry with us questions that have no definitive answers, aware that the Maya collapse is not a closed chapter, but an ongoing mystery, a whisper from the past that challenges us to listen, to reflect, and to seek understanding in what remains.